Oh God. Thank God, guys. Everything now is solved. Sorry about that. Thank you for being patient with me. Sometimes things, get a little messy when it comes to streaming. And honestly, today, yeah, I've been in a rush. But yeah, now everything should be better when it comes to the audio, the video. You guys can tell me if everything's good. The most interesting thing I saw today was a club at my school started a Tinder type test to hook up kids up for prom. Well, that's pretty nice. Prom is usually very tough. In Mexico, we have like a prom, not exactly an American styled prom, but it's very similar, and you gotta have a date, and it's fucking awful, man. I do feel it for the kids or for everyone who's having to deal with that. It's messy. It's messy dating at this age. It's like whatever. But there we go. If y'all are ready, let's start with this video that has been requested a few times, and it's a little long, but it's the languages of Spain. So obviously Spanish is the main one, of course. But I'm guessing we're gonna find a few ones that are interesting. We have Catalan. I hope that's how you pronounce it in English. Of course, in Spanish, it's Catalan. Basco, which is Basque, I think. What else what other language do I know? Oh,
Spanish is one of the most commonly spoken languages on the planet, ranging from Europe to North Africa and most of South America.
yeah.
Thanks to the old imperio.
Hell yeah. Spanish Empire running
Part
wild.
of my soul just died. But today's video isn't just about playing Het Wilhelmus on opposite day. And a lot of the time in
Does Galicia have its own language? I'm not sure. I don't think so.
Spanish,
But
the
maybe
language is
we'll
referred to not
find.
as Spanish but as
A lot of people in
Castilian,
Galicia, I
given
think
that
there
this is
are
only one of a
Celts,
multiplicity of other languages spoken
descendants
in
of
today's
Celts,
Spain.
of course.
So in this video, what are the languages of Spain?
Castilian Spanish, of course. Which I don't know if people wonder about this, but we in Latin America speak all Spanish, of course, and including Spain. But we do have very different accents, and we are able to recognize the different Spanish accents. There's actually like different quiz and tests that you can do as a Hispanic person to see if you can guess what the accent of Spanish is. It's very interesting.
Castilian. Hola, ¿dónde está la playa? Hello, where is the beach? Me llamo Hilbert. My name is Hilbert. Tengo 20
Yo, what's up with the captions? This reads, fucking Dutch people stole our colony.
años. I'm 21 years old. Putos holandeses robaron
Oh.
nuestra colonia bonita. Clog boys get wrecked. Castilian is an official
Yo,
language in
what the
all parts of
fuck?
Spain
What
and
the
is
fuck
spoken
was
by
that?
all its native inhabitants, totaling around 46 million Spanish speakers in all. This is just a small percentage of the global total of
500
Spanish speakers,
million.
which numbers roughly half
Bro,
a billion
we're
people.
everywhere.
Castilian is the second most spoken native language after Mandarin, and it's the fourth most spoken language overall, following English, Mandarin, and Hindi.
Fuck,
Spain
man.
is in fact only the country with the third most Spanish speakers in the world.
Whoa! The US is number 2, bro. Of course, Mexico first place, obviously. We have a lot of people. But the US is second. And Spain has 46 million people. So we're talking about, what, 50 million Spanish speakers in the US? That's crazy, dude.
Following Mexico and having recently been overtaken by the United States. Castilian is one of the
All right.
Romance
So
languages
it's a
descended
recent
from
phenomenon?
Latin. It sits in the Western Romance
Yeah, my
branch
God.
and makes up part of the Ibero-Romance subgroup alongside most of the other languages in the Iberian Peninsula. The ancestor of all the Romance languages is Latin, which was
Hell yeah.
brought into the Iberian Peninsula during the Roman conquest in the Second Punic War. Over time, the variety of Latin spoken there changed, just a few of the sound changes involved being the diphthongization of Latin I and O to IE and UE, with words like petra, terra, and mortem becoming piedra, tierra, and muerte. Word initial F became H, several of its sibilant consonants in the 16th century
Do
changing
y'all know anyone that speaks Latin? I feel like I feel like knew someone that was pretty how can you say it, snobbish about speaking a little bit of Latin.
to velar consonants, giving hijo and hacer rather than the Latin forms, and various Latin consonant clusters also produce different sounds in Spanish, such as llave and clave, both from the same initial root.
Okay, that's interesting. It probably takes into account kids learning it at school. I took 5 years of Spanish. That's something I'm really curious about. Do kids in America learn Spanish? I guess the answer is yes, because we in Mexico have English, which I guess it doesn't. The school does a great job because Mexicans don't really speak a lot of English. The southern Spain have Moorish influence. I think Spanish in general has Moorish influence. I remember when I had a literature. Well, like when you guys in the U.S. have English class, we have Spanish class where we learn about literally the Spanish language, and it was something like 5 to 10% of the Spanish language as a whole is influenced by Arabic. So probably it's
Ocho. Around
like a
4,000
national
Arabic
thing.
words have also entered Spanish, alongside influencing the word order and elements of its morphology.
We were talking
While
about
some Arabic
this.
features came to the Castilian heartlands with Mozarabic Christian refugees, most Arabic influence is felt in southern Spanish, particularly in Andalusian. While not included
were
in this
right.
video, there are also many distinct dialects.
That's interesting. A lot of people in Spain, I think, because I'm not from Spain, but they say that people from Andalusia, which is the southernmost province of Spain, they do have a very distinct and sometimes even hard to understand accent. To be fair, we are forced to learn Spanish in school. I remember I was forced to learn it when I was in high school. Well, I'm sorry about that, bro. Nothing forced is good, anyways. It's mandatory to take at least 2 years of a foreign language, at least in New York and New Jersey. Usually it's Spanish, Italian, Mandarin, or French. Yeah, in Mexico, the third most popular foreign tongue is French.
Of Spain, of the Spanish
It's
or
almost like a
Castilian
second language at this
with
point
the
here in the
major
US.
distinctions
I wonder
being
how people
between
feel
a
about that,
northern
you know?
and a southern variety.
En estos momentos a mí me gusta mucho el poder difundir mi identidad hispana y me siento hispana dentro de que nosotros no somos hispanos, latinos.
Pero el gorrión no tenía miedo. Se posó sobre la espalda del león y comenzó a regañarlo. ¿Qué negocio tienes viniendo a mi casa? Dice. Y aterrorizó.
Okay, can you guys notice that? I do. Maybe it's me, but I do feel that there's some difference.
Mis hijos. El león no le
It's-
prestó atención y siguió caminando.
So Mexicans speak Andalusian Spanish. No, Mexican Spanish has evolved, but I think a lot of the people that came to Mexico from Spain were actually from Andalusia, and I think it's definitely a little bit more similar. But yeah, it has evolved. It's very different now. The only languages we learn in the UK is French, German, and Spanish. Huh. When in uni, if you want, you can learn Chinese and Arabic.
On és la platja em dic Hilbert. Tinc 21 anys. William Shakespeare era definitivament català. Catalan is spoken in the Spanish province of Catalonia,
Catalonia, of
as well
course.
as the Balearic Islands and in the bordering province of Valencia, where they refer to their variety as Valencian. Catalan is the official language of the state of Andorra, and across the French border, the historic province of Roussillon also has a significant minority of Catalan speakers, as well as being spoken by the Alghero commune of the Italian island
shit.
of Sardinia to the east. Catalan has around 4 million native speakers, with a further 5 to 6 million able to speak it as a second language. As such, Catalan is the second most spoken
Damn, that's a lot of speakers. Can you please react to 1992 Atlantic hurricane season by F-13? Yeah, we'll give it a go, man. You can chill with that. I mean, the United States itself as a country don't have an official
in
language,
Spanish homes after
but
Castilian.
each of the 50 states require
While
English
Catalan
to
is
be
also a Western Romance language like
except Louisiana, which has French and English.
Castilian,
That would
it
make
makes
sense.
up part of the Gallo-Romance subgroup alongside Occitan and more distantly French. This is due to the fact that while both are descended from Latin, Catalan evolved
So
somewhat
Catalan
differently
is like
to
a mix of
Castilian.
Spanish and
It
French?
didn't undergo the same diphthongization of vowels and was also more conservative in retaining both some of the Latin consonant clusters and word initial F, which makes its verbs for to do and to make a lot more like French faire than Spanish hacer. Catalan has a number of dialects, though they are fairly uniform with around 90 to 95% mutual intelligibility between them. Standard Catalan is regulated by the
in
Institut
Barcelona,
d'Estudis Catalans,
which is
and
the
it's based on Central Catalan, which is
second
spoken in
largest
the urban
city.
areas of Catalonia and has the highest number of speakers. Valencian is sometimes classed as its own language, though most linguists view it simply as a glottonym, a regional name for a regional dialect of the Catalan language. The most distinct dialect is Algarese, spoken on Sardinia. Catalan has been an official language in Catalonia since the transition to democracy in the late 70s. The teaching of Catalan is mandatory in all schools.
On the 70s. It's really amazing how recent some of this stuff really is. So Spanish has been a democratic country for like 50 years. With Mexican Spanish, their dialect is like the same as the Spanish dialect from the lower regions of Spain. I think it's very similar. Of course, in Mexico, a lot of the words are influenced from the Native American languages of this land. And of course, we have developed our own words, and especially like swear words and things like that, right? But yeah, I think people from Andalusia or southern Spain in general would be able to understand it a little bit better.
And it's the main language of education, as opposed to Castilian, which is only used in limited circumstances. This has contributed to the fact that over 80% of over 15-year-olds in Catalonia can understand Catalan, with around 95%
that would make sense, yeah.
able to understand it. In Valencia, 58% speak Catalan and 78% understand
Can understand it. All right,
While most
gotcha.
Valencians maintain that their language is different to Catalan, younger people are more likely to view them as dialects of the same. The Spanish Constitution recognizes Valencian as an official language of Valencia alongside Castilian.
Identificar-te amb una identitat pròpia, amb unes arrels, amb la teva manera de fer i amb la teva manera de ser.
I'm able to understand a little bit of Catalan, actually. You know, now that we had the guy talking, I was like, oh shit, I can understand it.
Però a vegades he crescut a una casa on m'han explicat i m'han fet entendre l'importància.
Okay, this one I understand a little bit less.
La millor metàfora de la Viquipèdia és el seu logotip, és eixa bola que són com un puzzle, que el puzzle i mai s'acaba. Aleshores van començar a posar peces al trencaclosques.
This one I'm able to understand more. The one from Valencia. Bro, by the way, Galician. Yeah, apparently. So there's a language for Galicia. By the way, here in Mexico, we love Spain. We just love Spain. It's the motherland, man. It's a different relationship maybe for what the US and the UK have. But because we've never really had a lot of beef other than the whole colonization thing, of course, but it's the motherland. I freaking love it.
Hola, ¿dónde está a praia? Chámome Hilbert. Tenho 21 años. Manda chover na Habana. Which means
does sound
something
a lot like
it's
Portuguese.
about as likely to happen as that it will rain in Havana. Galician is spoken mainly in the province of Galicia, as well as along the border with Asturias, where a mixed variety of Asturian Galician or Unuavian is spoken. It's the native language of around 1.5 million people, though including those who speak it fluently as a second language, that total rises to around 2.4 million people. This makes Galician the main
3%.
language of around 3% of homes in Spain. Like Castilian, Galician sits in the Ibero-Romance subgroup, though unlike Spanish, it's grouped together with Portuguese.
I knew it. I fucking knew it. It sounded a lot like Portuguese. I don't know Portuguese, but I'm able to understand it. And as you can see, Galician Portuguese, they're very similar. US and UK actually love each other. Low. I don't know about the governments. No, for sure. The UK and the US have love each other too. But it's they had a lot of. Well, no, you know what? It's actually very similar. You know, Spain and Mexico, the US and the UK, it's very similar. Spain had a lot of babies everywhere with natives. Yeah, true. That's 100% true. My cousin lives in southern France, about 2 hours from the border from Spain, so she speaks fluent French and Spanish. Probably a lot of people from the region with the border speak both French and Spanish. But that's awesome. That's awesome. Speaking, the more languages you speak, the better.
Separate sub-branch known as Portuguese Galician. This becomes obvious when comparing Galician with its Latin ancestor, but especially so when contrasting this with Portuguese and Castilian.
It sounds
Galician
very
and
similar to
have
Portuguese,
clearly
though.
undergone a different set of regular sound changes to
Like
those
very
found in
similar.
Castilian. The proximity of Galician and Portuguese has led some to suggest that they are in fact simply different dialects of the same language, although most scholars do view them as two closely related languages. Normally, Galician is split into a Western, Central and Eastern grouping of dialects, with regional variation being fairly common on both sides of the Portuguese border. Far further south than a remote valley in Extremadura along the border with Portugal,
French people hate Quebecois. Hello. Is that so? That's interesting. Maybe because Quebecois people are a lot more conservative, I think. Maybe. I have no idea.
a related language called Falla is spoken, which possibly survived there as a result of having infrequent contact with Castilian speakers due to its remote location. Galician is an official language alongside Castilian within Galicia itself. It's taught in schools, and there's a public television channel in the language. Around 60% of Galicia's population speaks Galician, although younger people are more likely never to use the language when polled. There is also a divide between the cities, which are increasingly becoming solely Castilian-speaking, while the countryside is where Galician remains dominant.
All right. This one I'm able to understand. I understand like half, if not more, of what that man said. Asturias, okay. Asturleonese. What is that correct? I meant people from Montreal. Oh, I don't know how to spell their name. You know what I meant.
Hola,
So, yeah.
¿Dónde está la sablera? Chiamome Hilbert. Tengo 21 años. Fai un cutu que corta el mejillo, escarballa el pellejo y gela el moco. Which basically means it's so cold that not only does your urine freeze, but it also cuts you open and freezes the mucus inside. Asturianese is spoken mainly in the regions of Asturias and León in the northwest of Spain. The name Asturianese isn't often used by speakers, who generally use a glottonym for the variant they speak. The name itself comes from the two largest varieties, Asturian and Leonese. Far and away the most spoken of these languages is Asturian, with around 350,000
You are a
native
Galician.
speakers
I'm officially Galician.
and some 300,000 second language speakers. Asturianese is also part of the Ibero-Romance subgroup.
Which is, you know, as a matter of fact, I do have a Spanish ancestry. I think my biggest ancestry group is Spain. I think it kind of shows. But I don't know. It'd be interesting to look a little deeper and to if maybe there's a way for me to find out where exactly from Spain those ancestors came from.
Own branch to separate from Castilian and that of Portuguese Galician, although some dialects in Extremadura are seen as being transitory between this group and that of Castilian.
It's so fun, like
as such, Asturianese shares a few of
you
the
generally
common
don't
sound
think
changes that Castilian
of
evolved,
Spain as a
differentiating it from others.
multilingual,
While in other
multicultural
areas it looks more
country,
like the Portuguese Galician
but they
branch
are.
to
They
the west,
absolutely are.
or has undergone unique changes, making it its own language. Much of the diphthongization in Castilian is also found in Asturianese, as well as the palatalization of Latin L in certain contexts, although the mutation of Latin F to H does not occur except in those eastern dialects of Asturianese being influenced by Castilian. An interesting point about its morphology is that Asturian is the only Romance language with a neuter gender beside masculine and feminine when it comes to adjectives and nouns. The Asturianese language developed with the Kingdom of Asturias, which held out against Moorish rule in the Iberian Peninsula and was later succeeded by the Kingdom of León in the early 10th century. Just as is the case with Galician, there's a substrate of the Celtic language.
Yeah, the Moors, I think, conquered almost all of the Iberian Peninsula, except for like one little bit at the top. And if you looked at the map, Asturias was at the top of the map.
Languages spoken in the region before Latin, as well as the Germanic substrate from the period of Visigothic rule. Today, the language is split into several dialect groups, once again creatively named Western, Central, and Eastern. As previously mentioned, most speakers of Asta-Leonese
Very
will refer
creative,
to it
though.
by the name of their regional variant. Asturian in the north, Leonese in Leon,
I think you need to take a
and across the
DNA
border in
test,
Portugal
like
as
my family tree, who
Maranese.
literally try
There's
and find
also
every
Cantabrian,
ancestor you
spoken
had,
in the east
even
of
with
Cantabria,
pigs.
bordering Asturias, as well as Extremaduran further south along the Portuguese border, although these later dialects have been considerably influenced by Castilian. Asturian is not an official language in
To
Asturias.
be fair,
although
with
it has been
Spain, they wasn't
recognized.
really a united
A
country. They
1983
broke so
survey
many
found that
kingdoms.
only
Portugal was more
12%
united
of
than
Asturians
Spain.
spoke the language natively,
That was
with
Spain was more
2.5
diverse.
times that
True.
number speaking it as a second language. By 1994, this had increased greatly, with 68% of Asturians either speaking it as a first or second language, or being able to understand the language well. The language is also frequently taught in schools. Like Asturian, Leonese is also not official, but it has recently received recognition in the autonomous community of Castile and Leon. There are courses teaching the language in most of the larger villages in Leon, as well as efforts to increase the number of speakers in urban areas. Nevertheless, Leonese remains on UNESCO's most at-risk list of minority languages, with some predicting that it will be gone within 2 generations.
Whoa, that's... I mean, I don't know. How do you guys feel about that? Because for one, it's like, yeah, that's pretty sad. It's a language being lost. It's culture being lost. But at the same time, in Mexico, we have a similar debate about the indigenous languages. Like, should they be heavily preserved, or should people speak Spanish overall as a first language? Now, my opinion is languages should be preserved, but at the same time, we should all be united by the same language, right? You can go to northern Mexico, southern Mexico, blah, 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 and you'll see the same language being spoken. But at the same time, you know, it's being sad. It's sad to see a language disappear.
Muchas personas que estamos trabajando para que en un futuro lo sella. Como dice, el asturiano es una lengua que no es oficial, simplemente está reconocido en el artículo 4 de nuestro Estatuto de Autonomía.
Hemos venido aquí a Salamanca a dar unas charlas alrededor del leonés. Hemos estado pues contando cuentos, charlando, balrando, cantando con
That
el
sounds like
cantero,
Spanish to me.
y también pues
Maybe I'm Asturian, you know? Basque? Okay, this one I knew.
So I couldn't find anyone to help me out with the Basque pronunciation, so this may be somewhat of a car crush. Kaisho noan dagoan hondarza, Hilbert dut isena, hogaita ba.
The Oaxacans will get mad though. They always get mad, bro.
Mainly in the Basque
I've done my
country,
ancestry
an
DNA.
autonomous community in the very
86%
northeast of
African,
Spain,
16% European.
as well
That's
as across
very
the border
interesting.
in the French Basque country.
1%
It's the
Native
native language
American.
of around 700,000 people in Spain, a further 300,000 being able to speak it as a second language. That makes Basque the language of around 1% of all
That's
Spanish
very few
homes.
people. Fun fact, Basque is one of the only 3 major languages in Europe that aren't Indo-European, alongside Hungarian and Finnish. Not that fun, but whatever. No, it's interesting. I knew Hungarian and Finnish, but I had no idea that Basque
Now let's take
wasn't
a look at the
Indo-European.
Basque language tree.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah, not a lot going on. Basque is what's known as a language isolate, a
Wow.
language for which the relations to other languages are not known. It's fairly
They're
obvious to see
lonely
that
as
it's not
fuck.
derived from Latin, and so not related to all the other current languages spoken in Spain. Despite this, Basque has borrowed many words from Spanish and some from Occitan and French, as well as impacting other languages around it. And it's actually been suggested by linguists that the Spanish...
You can even draw regions. For example, you can link a little Catalan a little bit with French, and then you can link some of the language like Galician, for example, with Portuguese, and you can draw the regions. I did my DNA test a few years ago. I'm majority English with Irish, Scottish, German, and Norwegian ancestry.
loss
Gosh,
of
guys, I'm
Latin
so
initial
jealous. I
F
want to do my
was as a
ancestry. I
result
think
of
it'd be super
contact with
interesting.
Basque, which also does not have F initial words.
Like, I know for sure I have a lot of Spanish in me. I do for sure know that I have some Native American. I don't know what percentage. Maybe it's like 10. Maybe it can go like 30, 40. I don't know. And I do know that I have some Jewish and a little bit of Slavic in me. But it's a mystery. Like, I don't know the percentages.
But does have many words starting with H. Explaining where Basque comes from is very tricky, and several wacky theories have been put forward, ranging from being leftovers of the languages spoken in Iberia before the Romans, to being ancient forms of Indo-European or the only survivor of the languages spoken before the Indo-Europeans arrived.
The only
Another
survivor.
idea is that they are very distantly related to languages being spoken in the Caucasus, like Georgian, but personally my favorite theory relates it to several Native American languages. There are a number of dialects in Spanish Basque. In the west of the Basque Country, Biscayan
Native American
is spoken,
languages.
while further east, Guipuzcoan is spoken. The Upper Navarrese dialect is also spoken in the north of the neighboring region of Navarre. And in fact, thanks to the establishment of Basque language
For my
schools,
16% side,
it's spreading to
Scottish,
areas
Irish,
that previously
Portuguese,
never
well.
spoke Basque,
Gosh,
such as the
I'm so
western
jealous.
Encateri region
Good for you guys
and
for
the
doing your
Ribero
DNA
del Ebro
tests.
in southern
Must
Navarre.
be super fun.
Basque has been an official language of the Basque Country alongside Spanish as a result of the 1978 Constitution. In neighbouring Navarre, the language is co-official in just the northern provinces where Basque is spoken. And while only around 50% of the Basque Country speak any form of
I'm Mexican too. I've done the DNA test, but I'm American. And what did the DNA test said?
Basque, this number has doubled since 1994, and the highest percentage, 76%, of speakers can be found in the 16 to 24 age group.
Oh, wow.
With 3/4
Young
of
people.
those between the ages of 10 and 14 being fluent speakers.
It's very interesting because usually it's the other way around, right? The older people are the ones who are able to speak these type of languages.
Very positive sign for the future of the language.
Yeah.
800,000 pertsona inguruke hitz egiten dute, eta eskatu didate hemen grabaketa bat egiteko, nire ahoskerarena eta nire hizkuntzarena, eta beraz etorri naiz. Eta
That one was... I couldn't understood much of the
Ao neer a
previous.
plaja, me digi Hilbert. Jue 21 ans. Aranese is spoken in just one valley in the very north of the Spanish autonomous community of Catalonia. It's not a language isolate, however, and it's most often viewed as being a form of Occitan, a language spoken throughout
Southern
areas
France,
of southern
yeah.
France across the border. Within Occitan, Aranese is sometimes viewed as a glottonym for Gascon, either viewed as a related Occitan language or a dialect thereof.
Isn't the region of France that it's borders Spain, Gascony? They produce like either cognac or Armagnac.
There are around
I think,
2,600
maybe, I don't know.
native speakers of the language, while around another 2,100 or so can speak it passively. Aranese as part of Occitan makes up part of the Gallo-Romance subgroup alongside Catalan, the language spoken throughout much of the rest of Catalonia. When compared to Castilian, Occitan is rather similar to Catalan in retaining more Latin
The
monophthongs.
DNA test
While there are
mostly
several
German
forms
with, and
depending on the
Italian with some
dialect of
Spanish,
Occitan,
English, and Scottish.
Gascon and especially
Nice.
Aranese often replaces word initial Latin F with H, just as is the case with Castilian. It may be the case this is due to early contact with Basque, which formerly was spoken over a much wider area than today. In most dialects of Aranese, this initial H is not pronounced, just as in Castilian. Aranese has greatly benefited from Catalonia's laws regarding minority languages, and as such, since 2010, is the third official language of the
I also wonder what are the foreign languages in Spain. There's probably a lot of Arabic, maybe like some Swahili, I don't know.
entire autonomous
French, of
community
course,
alongside
English.
Catalan and Castilian.
I think there's a lot of
Official
British people living in Spain, right?
Towns in the Val d'Aran are in Occitan, and toponyms appear as such on maps and road signs. In 2001, 90% of Val d'Aran's inhabitants could understand the Aranese language,
All right.
though speaking rates were lower at around 60 to 65%, while only 26% were able to write it.
Oh.
By 2008, a study done on over 15s found that 78% could understand Aranese, with 57% able to speak it and 35% able to write. In 2018, the percentage
Yeah,
of
many
people who
Brits
could
like
understand
to live in
Aranese had
Spain.
risen to 83%.
Is it for the
who
sun?
could
You know, they want to escape the weather of the UK. I'd said 50% native, 29% Spanish, 6% Portugal. That's interesting.
it
A
to
lot of tourists,
61%,
for sure.
while those able to write it had
Sounds
increased
right.
to 46% of the population. Aranese, therefore, is in a very strong position, the number of active speakers, and crucially also those able to write in the language
They
increasing
increased,
every
yeah.
year.
pare era de Córdoba, però vingué a Valdara molt petitet. Quan se m'aridé que era la meva mare, pues, tots ells parlaven aranès, era la llengua que jo parlia en casa. I a part, era a meva casa en lloc que t'ajuda i important. No sé, perquè...
It does sound a little bit like French. Aragonese. There's music in Aragonese. Holy shit! With my 86% African DNA, I'm mostly Nigerian, Congolese, Mali, Senegal, Cameroon, Ghana, and Ivory Coast. So DNA tests can really go specific, huh? Wow. I wonder, maybe I have some African in me, you know? If I do, then I know where that DNA, well, forget about it.
Just as with Basque, I couldn't find anyone to help me with the Aragonese language, so I'm going to give this a best shot, but if you speak Aragonese, let me know what I did wrong in the comments. Hola, ¿dónde es la playa? Me digo Hilbert. Tengo 21 años. Aragonese is mainly spoken in the Spanish autonomous community of Aragon, as well as in the border zones with Huesca and Zaragoza. As with many of the languages covered in this video, most speakers of Aragonese refer to it by the name of the regional dialect they speak or another glottonym, such as Fabla, Cheso, and Patués, being some of the most common glottonyms. Aragonese is spoken natively by some 12,000 people, though there are up to a further 50,000 passive speakers of the language. There is some debate as to where Aragonese falls in the Western Romance subgroup. Some argue it's an Ibero-Romance language, as there are several features shared with Castilian and older features in common with Astur-Leonese and Galician Portuguese. However, it also shares multiple features with neighbouring Catalan, as well as others with Aranese and Occitan more broadly. In short, Aragonese is a perfect example as to why genetic language tree diagrams are often limited in their utility when it comes to plotting the respective
nobody knows where it comes from.
Language.
Many people do. I'm less than 1% Bantu, but I figured that it wasn't worth mentioning. Yeah, that happens. I mean, everyone technically came from Africa. Africa is the birth of mankind. True. Well, that's true. Well, we're all Africans in a way.
Grow together over time, adopting features from one and the other. It's easy to see this when comparing it with other
I think a lot of Mexicans have
as it shares some of
African
ancestry,
a little higher percentage, because in Mexico there were slaves and they sort of mixed with the population.
In Aragonese, once again being split into Western, Central, and Eastern, but excitingly also Southern. Note that in some urban centres outside this area, such as Zaragoza, there has been renewed interest in the language.
Many people in Spain have African DNA, and some parts of Sicily because of the Moors.
Since the late 90s, schools in Aragon have had the option to teach Aragonese lessons, although no schools use it as a language of instruction. In 2009, the language was recognised as a historic language of Aragon, though it is not co-official with Spanish.
Que se fa hablando más aquí en Aragón, y lo que voy a hacer es explicaros una mica como, bueno, una mica de suya historia.
Okay, I can understand some things.
Before rolling the credits on this week's video, I would like to say a massive thank you to the City Council of Lugo in Galicia, who are kindly sponsoring this video with regard to the reenactment festival of Arde Lucus, which is a reenactment festival that takes place in Lugo in the heartland of where Galician is still spoken.
They sponsored this video, that's interesting. When doing my DNA, I found that even though my family had been living in London for 200 years, wow, that's a long time to live in a city. My dad's family originally came from Western England, and my mom's from the Midlands. Wow, that's very specific. I love that.
Set in the time period when the Romans, bringing of course Latin with them, invaded Spain, as well as looking at several of the Celtic peoples and Iberian peoples that were in the Iberian Peninsula before they arrived. It's a great festival that goes on every year, and it's usually in the end of June. This time it's from the 17th to the 20th of June, and I very much would have liked to have been there myself, but obviously if you checking it out, because it's an awesome festival. They have an awful lot of different reenactors and other on the languages of Spain. I hope you've enjoyed it.
That's awesome. Does this guy upload a lot of language things? Definitely was very interesting. I always love learning about, the motherland, Spain, the place, the language I speak. My family comes from a Catholic background, so of course that influence too. It's always good to learn But that was fun. Now, guys, you guys in the chat, I was gonna ask this question before, but do you guys have Twitch? And if you guys have Twitch, do you use it a lot? And if that's the case, would you guys see the stream on Twitch? I'm interested because, you know, I just want to diversify a little bit and maybe start streaming on Twitch as well. But I already do a lot of things with the channel, and I do spend a lot of time, to be honest, you know, working on the thumbnails and the videos, the descriptions. It requires a lot of time, so I don't want to stream on Twitch if like nobody's gonna watch it, or you know, if you guys don't really use it. Or like if history reactions aren't a thing on Twitch. He's generally a history channel, huh? Well, that was super fun. Maybe he has some other videos of other languages. Not for today, but... yeah. So he does have some other. So I wanted to watch Geography Now, Jamaica. But we can watch one of these first. Twitch is a little weird. You need to be a hot girl to make it. Damn. Well, I'm not that, so I'm a little screwed on that part. Half of my family lives in the USA, and I don't know much about them. They are very different from us. Wow, that's interesting. Do they live in like northern USA, like Minnesota, the Dakotas? A lot of Nordic people live there. Well, not a lot of Nordic people, but a lot of Nordic descendants. Come on, don't be so modest. Oregon, huh? Well, would you look at that? That's so cool though, having family. Do you guys meet? Do you guys have they traveled to your country, or have you been to Oregon? Oregon is nice, you know. A lot of weed smokers, but other than that, it's a really cool place. But I imagine so. Them being very different, you know, very American. But all right, let's go, man. So this is from Real Life Lore. How this one picture explains all of history. And when you look at the picture itself, it's like, so like one half of the U.S. being very bright when it comes to city nightlights. You got a lot of metropolitan areas here. You got Chicago being blocked by the sign. You got the New York megalopolis. You got Atlanta over here and a bunch of others. And over here, other than the coast, you know, talking about Oregon and California, you don't really got a lot of stuff going on. So I wonder, maybe he's going to talk about that. I don't know.
This video is made possible by CuriosityStream and Nebula. Watch another, full-length companion video to this one in my ongoing Modern Conflict series that explains the entire course of the Battle of Aleppo during the Syrian Civil War.
After this video,
you can access by signing up for the CuriosityStream Nebula bundle deal for less than $15 a year at curiositystream.com.
It's a good deal, all right? I have to be honest.
You've probably seen a map of the world before that looks a lot like this. A map of the world's 195 mostly recognized countries. These maps show the arbitrary lines created by humans over the centuries that divide us. They show the boundaries of nations and the locations of cities, and over the past...
I would love to do a test, you know, a world map test to see how many countries I could name.
Several decades, this map has rarely changed. The last time that it formally did so was more than a decade ago in July of 2011, when South Sudan was born as the world's most recent country. Every political
my grandmother, my mother's side, before she passed. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, man. She remembered her ancestors from Africa on a boat coming to the USA. Wow. What a story, man.
You would have failed to notice the true, enormous, and unprecedented rate of changes that have been taking place
That's
all
beautiful.
across
I'm
the
sorry
globe
for
over the past 10
you know, her
years.
passing, but...
And in order to see that change more clearly, you've got to switch to a different map showing our planet at night. This is the Black Marble, a beautiful map created by researchers at NASA using thousands of separate composite images that have all been combined into a single whole, taken from a satellite specifically designed to sense the world for man-made lights. Nothing tells us more about the spread of humanity across the planet
This
than
is
the
so
patterns
cool, though.
made by the glittering lights of our cities. And if you know where the right places are to look, this map can pretty much tell you all in just a single image, the entire history and story of mankind. Let's begin by looking at the real shapes and patterns of where people within countries live. Like here in Afghanistan. On a political map, Afghanistan has a very unique and complex looking shape. But viewed on the map of lights at night, the true and simpler pattern of where Afghanistan's people live is revealed. In reality, Afghanistan's 32 million people live largely in a gigantic ring, with a single circular highway connecting.
Yeah, a ring pretty much close to the borders of Afghanistan. You know, over here Pakistan. No, sorry, over here Pakistan. Right here China a little bit. And I don't know what these borders are. I did the test. The only ones I could really name is countries in sub-Saharan Africa.
Most of the country's major
yeah, the ones
cities
where your
and population
ancestry were
centers
from.
altogether. This is largely because in the center of this ring are some of
Mountains.
the tallest mountains found anywhere on the planet, with some of the peaks rising to as high as 24,000 feet above sea level. The interior is
Geography can tell you a lot about a country. That's 100% true.
just too harsh of an environment for large
Not only
cities
geography,
to be built
but
on, and thus the
that
ring
that
around
light
them
map.
is where most Afghans actually call home. Strangely, the most comparable pattern of civilization to Afghanistan's ring of people can be found across the world over in the Atlantic on Iceland. Similar to Afghanistan, the center of Iceland is full of
I can't think of two very more different places than Afghanistan and Iceland.
and harsh, cold, rugged terrain that isn't ideal for founding large-scale settlements on. Meanwhile,
But that's true, though. Aren't there a lot of volcanoes in Iceland? A lot of, I don't know, fucking mountains and volcanoes and
Iceland's
shit.
coast has warmer temperatures and provides easier access to fishing and trade. And so, as a result, Iceland's 366,000 people live largely in a ring around the island.
So yeah, pretty much the same thing. Here's Reykjavik, which I'm guessing, it's the largest dot, so I would imagine that's the capital of Iceland. And then we just have a ring.
Interior along the coast, and about half of them live in the bright, glowing dot of the capital city, Reykjavik. Let's now take a look at another fascinating population pattern by traveling across the world again to the South American continent and focusing here over central Argentina.
My bros.
During the daytime, you'd barely notice any signs of human settlements here at all, and might even think that you're looking at an abandoned part of the world. But flip the switch to night, and the story looks very different indeed. Now,
The countries with Stan should form the ultimate Stanistan country. I agree, though. That'd be cool. So this is Buenos Aires, the capital of Argentina. One of these has to be Mendoza, which I actually have family members living there of my Jewish side of the family.
now, you'll notice rows and rows of nearly perfectly spaced dots of light that betray the presence of precisely planned and organized human settlements. These dots are each a town, and they appear roughly every 30 to 50 kilometers apart from each other because they're all found across railroads, and they all grew up as railway stations.
It's very interesting. You can look, they're all going to Buenos Aires, which is a pretty massive city, and they're all going there. The last time we saw them, the Americans pissed off my grandmother because they had a nice expensive car, and my grandmother was very competitive against his overseas siblings. Is that a reason to get angry? A nice expensive car? That sounds like a, real nice thing, yo. Speaking of countries, did you know Peru has the oldest living civilization in the world? I think, right? It's north of Chico.
Contrast the map of the area
Nordic
at
Chico.
night with this map of the Argentinian railroad network from the beginning of the 20th century. You can see how this pattern viewed from space
The United
became
Provinces
the way
of
that it is
Rio de la
today.
Plata.
Over in Russia, a similar pattern can be viewed by the continuous chain of lights
Oh,
spanning from
Russia.
Moscow across thousands of kilometers to the east through Asia. These sparkling lights of Russian civilization across Eurasia trace the Trans-Siberian Railway, the longest railway line in the world that connects Moscow in the west with Vladivostok in the east, over a distance of more than 9,000 kilometers. And in between the two cities, the
boy.
vast railway system connects hundreds of Russian towns across Eurasia that are easily spotted in the darkness. The initial railway was constructed and finished during the Tsarist times in 1916, and has been almost continuously expanded upon from there ever since. Today, the rails extend
Russia's
from
massive. I mean, you gotta connect Russia, and again, they're all connecting to Moscow.
Russia into Mongolia, China, and North Korea, and later on this century, there are even plans to connect Tokyo and Japan to the network via a series of bridges from Honshu to Hokkaido, from Hokkaido to Sakhalin, and from Sakhalin.
That's a massive project, and that'd be pretty cool if that could happen, but I don't know. He's got kinder as he aged. Also, Mexico has one of the oldest pyramids in the world. Some say their pyramids even older than Egypt. I have heard that, but I don't know the timeline.
The Asian mainland,
to be honest.
one of the most fascinating areas of the world to focus over at night
Australia.
is Australia. Of course, the lights of Australian civilization are small for such a massive area of land.
It's also like a ring.
Almost entirely to the more habitable and easier to live on East Coast. The city of Perth, seen right here in the west, is the most isolated major city of over 2 million people anywhere in the world. And it's so much easier to see how that's the case on this map. The nearest other significant city with a population of more than 100,000 people is Adelaide over here, and that's 2,100 kilometers away. The 70% of Australia in between the lights of cities is covered by the outback desert, vast and inhospitable and nearly empty of people, save for this.
Do y'all watch Survivor? One of the early seasons was filmed in the outback. Southern Siberia is actually pretty fertile.
Small speck of light directly in the continent's center. This is the town of Alice Springs, population of 26,000 people, and directly next to Alice Springs is Pine Gap, a joint United States-Australian intelligence base that is run by the CIA and the NSA with more than 800 employees.
Yo, don't tell me.
Why the CIA
Don't tell me that's interesting or a little creepy. You know, the CIA manages a base in the middle of Australia.
CIA and the NSA have a base in the middle of the Australian outback is because of its prime.
Oh, what happened?
This video was made possible by Curiosity across railroads, easier to live on East Coast. The town of Alice Springs, population of 26,000 people, and directly next to Alice Springs by the because
I don't know what
prime
happened.
Geographic significance. The base here controls and operates American spy satellites as they pass over this third of the globe, including China, North Korea, the Asian part of Russia, and the Middle East. Theoretically, the base that controls all of them could have been placed anywhere here, but the dead center of the Australian continent was chosen as the singular best location for it because it's thousands of kilometers away from the ocean in every direction. In the middle,
it's thousands of kilometers away in the ocean, and then it's thousands of kilometers away from all the other Australian cities. Countries like Australia is weirdly designed. I don't know, something about them throws me off. Australia is weird,
inside of a very friendly country, and as a result, the location is simply far too remote and inland for enemy ships passing in international waters nearby to intercept any of the signals. And thus, that's why you have a lone, isolated dot of light in the middle of a sea of darkness.
You made it into the big leagues if you have the CIA in
the
your
United
country.
States itself has a very interesting population pattern as well.
Ooh, come on. Well, here's Mexico. He's probably not gonna mention it, but let's look at Mexico. We have Mexico City right here, and the entirety of the Mexico City megalopolis, if you could call it. So I live around this area, my friends, and I think this is Guadalajara. This is Monterrey, I think, right here, and TJ, Cancun. That's it. There's an ancient burial mound in Western England.
In this case, the absence of lights. You'll
The
notice
Bronze
that
Age,
America
the
is
Anglo-Saxons
divided
showed
between
up.
two halves of roughly equal size.
It was a smithing
The east,
forge built
a
by
bastion
giants.
of bright
Wow.
lights, and the west, an archipelago of bright
That's very
islands
interesting.
scattered across a sea of darkness. And the line that separates the two sides flows almost perfectly straight.
Yeah, this is Denver, I think. This must be Salt Lake City in Utah. This has to be Las Vegas, Phoenix.
Just to the west of San Antonio, Austin, Fort Worth, Oklahoma City, Wichita, Omaha, Sioux Falls, and Fargo. This line,
Shit, it's very interesting how they perfectly line up. You got the 3 massive cities in Texas, Oklahoma City, all the others that he mentioned.
Largely follows the 100th meridian line of longitude.
United
and it
Mexican
still largely
States.
marks to this day in the 21st century the
UMS,
beginning of the
UMS,
American
UMS.
western frontier, with few large settlements scattered to the west beyond it. The reason for why this pattern continues to exist
weather.
is because the 100th meridian roughly marks the geographic boundary between the wetter and more humid climate found in the east and the drier, more arid climate of the west. Moist air coming in from the Gulf of Mexico rarely travels any further to the west than this line, while at the same time, the gigantic Rocky Mountains chain casts a vast rain shadow across the landscape that prevents additional moisture from blowing in from the Pacific. And so, as a result, the agriculture in the west has always been forced to rely much more heavily upon irrigation technologies and has always been less efficient than the farms in the east,
Corn.
which means less food and
There's a
less
lot of
people
corn,
over the
right?
centuries of development. Geography often dictates where people end up settling down.
Yeah, that's a pretty famous map, the one of the Nile in Egypt and how most of the people live here.
As in Egypt. Here, at night, you can easily trace the course of the Nile River through the country as the brilliant lights of Egyptian civilization trace its outline. Around 97 million people live within just a few kilometers of the Nile banks inside
Whoa,
of Egypt, making it one of the most
97
densely
million,
populated
dude.
regions in the world and causing the entire river to be easily visible from space at night. A very similar pattern of lights can also be observed far away in Pakistan along the Indus River.
Yeah, the Indus
Just like
River.
the Nile, the Indus
True. I wonder how many people actually know Mexico's actual name is United Mexican States. In Mexico, of course, everyone knows, but outside Mexico, I don't know. I don't think a lot of people know.
has been a center of civilization for thousands of years.
I think other countries have that name for, like Colombia. I think Colombia, it's also the United States of Colombia or something like that.
As people have farmed and tilled the river's rich and fertile floodplains. In spite of the
Indus River,
conditions,
massively
it difficult to grow
important
food
when it comes to
anywhere else in the
history,
rest
the
of
history of
region.
the
Now,
Indus
in the
River
21st
Valley
century,
civilization.
The bright lights of Pakistan's modern cities make it easy to
Karachi,
trace the river's
Hyderabad,
course from space.
and
as
Islamabad,
many of the country's biggest
which
cities
must
are
be this
clustered across it. While the Indus is an example of a clear geographic feature that humans have adapted around, this wavy line of lights directly nearby to the east is the exact opposite. This is actually the international border that divides Pakistan from India, an arbitrary line that was created by the British.
Yo, it's fucking interesting. You can actually see the border. And of course, you know, Pakistan and India have a lot of trouble, and it's probably because the border is has a lot of military troops, military bases, equipment. There's a lot of things there, so, you know, there's light. My Mexican friend here didn't even know Mexico had states. No, I did knew. Honestly, me neither. I thought they had provinces. There's a lot of underground water in that area as well. It's called the Ogala Aquifer, I think.
Divided the two
making
countries
the U.S.
and granted
very
them both
fertile.
independence more than 70 years ago. Without any mountains or rivers to mark the border during the day, back then, this line only existed on papers, on maps, and within mines. But now, in the 21st century, it can be clearly seen from space and is very real. Because India and Pakistan are bitter geopolitical rivals who have fought 4 wars against each other in the past few decades, India, citing security reasons, opted to install thousands of kilometers of floodlights across the entire length of the border to keep it all well illuminated at night, which makes it perhaps the easiest and the most obvious artificial, man-made creation to spot from space. Meanwhile, within India, it's really the change in lights over time that have been the most fascinating. Back in the year 2000, only about 60% of the Indian population had any access to electricity. By 2012,
Wow.
that number had increased to about 80%, but that still meant that 20% of India, or about
20% of over 1 billion people. That's insane.
253 million people still
Don't
have
have
no
access
access
to
to
electricity.
As
That's
a result,
insane.
the nighttime map of India at the time looked a lot like this. But 2014 saw the election of Prime Minister
Modi.
Narendra Modi, who ran on a campaign promise of bringing electricity to every village in India. Thus, by 2016, when NASA created the latest edition of the Black Marble photo, the lights across the country increased
Yo.
and created the latest edition.
Whew, look at that. I think the difference is particularly large in I think this is Delhi. This has to be Mumbai, and I don't know the name of the other cities.
Of the
But look at that, look at that.
photo, the lights across
Oof,
the country
this
increased
region
dramatically.
saw a
Edition of the Black
massive
Marble
boom.
photo,
Look at this.
The lights across the country increased dramatically.
I mean,
to look like
good for them.
this, as more than 125 million Indians gained electricity for the very first time.
Wow.
And all in a span of only 4
Wow.
short years. This became one of the greatest achievements ever made in the entire history of energy. And now, in 2022, with nearly 100% of the population having access to electricity, India is among the brightest countries seen anywhere on the planet's surface. Immediately next door, China, with her population of more than 1.4 billion people, is also one of the brightest.
Of course, we can see the divide between Eastern and Western China.
Countries in the world. But the change in lights across China over the same time period tells a very different story than the one in India.
Yo, it's also really fucking interesting, and I think probably he's gonna talk about this, North and South Korea.
Look at the map of lights from 2012 and then fast forward to 2016. You'll notice nearly everywhere a dimming of lights across the countryside and the intensification of brightness coming from the cities. For decades now, all across the world, people nearly everywhere have been moving from the countryside into the cities for better access to jobs, markets, education, and healthcare. But nowhere on the planet has this general trend been more acute than in China, where just since 1975, nearly half of the entire population, around 715 million people, have abandoned the Chinese countryside for the cities. Back in 1975, China was still overwhelmingly a rural and agrarian society with only 17.4% of the population residing within urban cities. But then, in the late 70s and the early 80s, the Chinese government began doing things differently. They created what they called special economic zones, in at first 18 cities along the coast, where the taxes were less and where there was less state oversight from the centralized communist government.
Oh, well, I didn't
These
miss
zones
much.
attracted a lot
But I
of
had to get
foreign
my
businesses
water.
to set up their operations. And with the plentiful new jobs they provided, came in workers from the countryside. The very first of these zones was the town of Shenzhen, which at the time in 1980 was a
Northern India is more densely populated, but the south is more urban and already developed, but not as populated. So right now, Northern
relatively
India is
sleepy
growing the most.
town of only 300,000
All right, that makes a
people.
lot of sense.
Today, only a little more than 40 years later, Shenzhen has exploded into a global tech hub metropolis of more than 13 million. Now, in
God.
2022, China boasts more than 312
Fucking
urban
insane.
areas with populations of more than 500,000 people, most of which you've probably never even heard of.
Oh, God.
For comparison, the United States has only 96 of these large urban areas, meaning that there are today
No
vastly
way.
more urban Chinese people living in cities than
What
Americans,
the
which was not
fuck?
at all the case back in 1975. The change in lights across China in the 4 years
Well, I mean, it would make a lot of sense that, you know, China has a lot of people, so I don't think why I'm that surprised by that.
between 2012 and 2016 shows this greater historical
All right,
trend
come on.
very clearly. In just that short time frame, more than 81 million people, about the population of Germany, left the Chinese countryside and moved into the cities.
Okay,
the brightest of
that's-
all these areas and the brightest single spot
Shenzhen.
anywhere on the Earth's surface is right here, the Pearl River Delta, a conglomeration of close-by cities like Hong Kong, Shenzhen, Guangzhou, and Zhuhai that, if considered a single urban
That's really fucking bright, dude. Look at this. It's extremely bright. And of course, you got Hong Kong and Shenzhen and Guangzhou, which I think it's also pretty fucking massive. So combining all of those, you could have... okay, I want to hear how many people.
metropolitan area would be the largest anywhere in the world, with a population of about 70 million people. In other words, half of the population of Russia, all living together in a single, small, intensely
Wow.
bright metropolis.
Oh, man.
Ever since the year 1879,
That's
when the light
insane,
bulb
dude.
was first patented by Thomas Edison, the globe has been growing brighter and brighter with every passing year from space, as more and more
Imagine the traffic. Oh, God, the traffic. What a nightmare, my guy. What a nightmare.
of humanity has come online and gained access to electricity.
I think Guangzhou
Today,
is more
than
populated than
90%
Shenzhen.
of humanity has electricity.
Maybe.
The
I
highest
honestly have no
figure that's
idea.
ever been known. But at the same time, more than 759 million people worldwide still do not have any access to it. And more than 90% of those people live inside of one of the darkest regions
Africa.
seen anywhere on the planet still, here, sub-Saharan Africa. There are some areas of intense brightness here,
South
to be
Africa.
sure, like in the major cities like Lagos, Nairobi, Johannesburg, and Cape Town, but by and large, sub-Saharan Africa appears far darker than it should be. Not because it's empty, but because there are still 683 million people who live here without any access to electricity. The country of Burundi has the lowest overall percentage of people who have access to electricity anywhere in the world, at only 11% of the population. Meanwhile, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, or DRC, is the country
This is, look at how, such a massive country. And it's dark. There's some few spots here, but it's
with the highest overall number of people still remaining without electricity, 72.5 million, more than the population of France. These millions of people still use solid fuels like wood for heating and for light. And as a result, their presence is invisible to the light-seeking satellites of NASA, and the areas they inhabit appear empty. And thus, the DRC in particular, and sub-Saharan Africa in general, is the largest.
It's hard to think that even though those spots might look empty to us, like there's people living here with no electricity.
Area in the inhabited
It's fucking
world
sad.
still remaining that,
It is.
from the perspective of space, appears largely as it has for the past several millions of years.
Because this would lead you to believe this place is uninhabited, but Africa has over 1 billion people. Like what, 1.4 billion people? And you would think there's
But just
barely
like how
any
the
people.
absence of lights doesn't necessarily mean the absence of people, the presence of lights doesn't necessarily indicate their presence,
presence of
either.
people?
The North Sea is a large body of water around Europe, and as you're probably aware, oceans generally don't tend
have
to have
people,
a lot of
yeah.
people. But when you focus over the sea at night, you'll notice dozens of
Oh
little light
shit. Actually, it has a megacity called Kinshasa in the western part of the country. It has about 15 million people, but it's kind of hard to see. Damn. 15 million people, and you couldn't see a very large spot of light. Imagine that. I'm guessing these are all oil platforms.
lights sprinkled across the surface. Rather than representing human settlements, these lights betray the presence of the roughly
Oil.
170 offshore oil and gas rigs that are operated in the sea by Norway, the UK, and the Netherlands. Oil and gas wells emit a lot of light because, as they drill, they flare gas. When you have a lot of gas flaring going on in a concentrated area,
That's
their
gonna be a lot of
presence is
light.
revealed at night from the sky. And using this as a guide, you can clearly see where the world's most important sources of oil and gas can be found.
The Gulf,
Besides for the
Arab
sites in
countries?
the North Sea, you can see lights in the eastern Mediterranean off the coasts of Egypt and Israel, representing the offshore gas rigs that are operated by both countries. You can see an extensive chain of lights across the Caspian Sea flowing out from the capital city of Azerbaijan, Baku, where the very first offshore oil platforms in the world were originally constructed. And of course, the area around the Persian Gulf appears bright enough to almost be its own galaxy. owing to the
Holy
extensive
fuck. Look at some of these are massive, dude. If the land didn't show up, you would think this is just land. God damn.
oil and gas fields
Dubai
across
is also
Iran,
pretty bright.
Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates. The waters of the Persian Gulf itself are spectacular.
It's also really interesting, and I don't know if you guys have noticed, but some of the roads here in the UAE have light. Like you can see very clearly the roads, and I wonder why that is. Maybe it's like some sort of infrastructure thing, so like drivers don't get lost in the desert. Maybe, I don't know, but it's interesting. I hope it talks
Spectacularly
about
lit up, with more than 145 offshore rigs, including the ones around here. The North Field split between Qatar
And I think you can also see the difference because the light of the oil platforms is different from the light in the cities. And for example, here, in which I think this is Kuwait, You can see a lot of light that's sort of very bright but different from the light in the cities.
Iran, which is by far the single largest natural gas field ever discovered anywhere on the planet.
Yeah, it's
lights
fucking
tell
insane.
stories everywhere you see them, but the absence of lights can tell just as strong of a tale. For another notable area, we have to travel back across Asia to the Korean Peninsula, where the difference in lights between north and south is as great as the difference between night and day itself. Save for the capital of Pyongyang, North Korea is almost entirely dark, despite having a population of nearly 26 million people. The border in the north with China can be clear.
Gosh, man, you gotta feel bad for the people of North Korea, man. Like, they are struggling hard. Oil rig light is a lot more diffusive. Exactly, it's a lot more diffused than the light in the cities.
Clearly seen by the zigzagged patterns of bright Chinese cities over on the other side of it. At the very same time, the southern border with South Korea can be clearly seen lit up in its entirety.
What a difference. Look at, I mean, South Korea, it's pretty much very well lit. And the massive city of Seoul compared to like that complete darkness. You can also see the border here, you know? You can very clearly see the demilitarized zone. North Korea is actually very densely populated, really. I guess a lot of people live in close to the capital, maybe.
Entirety from space as well. This is the most heavily militarized border anywhere in the entire world that artificially cuts the Korean peninsula in half. And
yeah, exactly.
divides
You can see the border.
regime in the south from the totalitarian regime in the north, guarded by millions of soldiers and landmines on either side. As a result, the entire border is basically a gigantic fortress that is completely covered by floodlights at night, cementing the old, arbitrary ceasefire line that ended the Korean War back in 1953 as a permanent and clearly visible.
Hi, I am from Kuwait. Finally, someone noticed us. For sure, man. I fucking love Kuwait. North and South Korea is like Venezuela and Colombia. Probably that's kind of true, yeah.
Man-made feature.
Most of them are rural people without electricity.
Night, as if it were instead a major natural geographic feature. And right across that border to the south is Seoul, the largest and brightest city in South Korea with more than 25 million inhabitants.
Also, what is this light that it looks like the ocean, but there's this very interesting light. I don't know what that is. Look at the North Korean army dance moves. For sure, we can
almost
take
as
a look
many
at
people as live in the entirety of North Korea combined. South Korea's tremendously bright lights are indicative of the modern, developed, and prosperous nation that is the world's 8th largest consumer of electricity. Meanwhile, the darkness of North Korea is indicative of the inefficient, totalitarian, fascist state that only has
Fishing
an electricity rate of 48.5% of their population, meaning that more than 13 million North Koreans continue having no access to power. North and South Korea's man-made political shapes are therefore both clearly visible from space. And this view puts into perspective the more practical reality that South Korea is effectively, despite being connected by land to the rest of Asia, an island, surrounded by darkness on all 4 sides, as every other island in the world is. But the most startling change in light seen anywhere in the world over the past few years has been back over on the other side of Asia, within the Middle East. In the past decade, 3 countries in the Middle East have undergone devastating civil wars that have claimed the lives of hundreds of thousands of people.
Iraq and Syria.
Iraq and Syria. And in the time between 2012 and 2016, when the two...
I think North Korean military is freaking huge, even on par with China. Yeah, they have a lot of people. It's one of the largest for sure when it comes to people.
Black marble photos were compiled, much has changed. In Yemen, the lights have gone out across conflict zones since the civil war began in 2014, and after nearly 400,000 deaths. In Iraq, ISIS has been long since defeated, but from 2012 to 2016, you can clearly see the lights fading to darkness in all of the areas that they captured and occupied. And then, worst of all, there are the effects of war that can be clearly seen from space above Syria. As the civil war in the country intensified and the catastrophic destruction began growing greater, as much as 80%.
Oh my God. According to what I can find, it's noticed as fishing vessels. What the fuck?
Effects of war that can be clearly seen from space above Syria.
What the actual fuck?
First of all, there are the effects of war that can be clearly seen from space above Syria. As the civil
Oh my God. Look at that. There's a path of lights right here. This path goes 100% dark. It goes completely
there are the
dark.
effects of war that can be
Look,
clearly seen
look at
from
this.
space above Syria. As the
Oh my God. That has to be at least hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. Gosh, it's really sad. Damn, it's bad, right? I would recommend looking at North Korea. You dropped a bomb on me. Funny video. Heads up. It has music in it, so potential copyright for sure. We can look at that. It's more than 1 million people. North Korean army.
The catastrophic destruction began growing greater. As much as 80% of the lights in the country went out in just the 4 years between 2012 and 2016.
That's devastating. Imagine millions of people who live in Syria just losing their light, their electricity. It's devastating. It's really sad to see.
Significant changes of all came around the city of Aleppo, the largest city in.
Yeah, look at that. Look at all the light, all the dots. And I was so surprised by that path of light. These two regions were
side of Syria and one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world. As the 4 years between 2012 and 2016 went by, the lights across the city went
off.
And that tells us a very, very grim story. For in those 4 years, one of the most important, devastating, brutal, and catastrophic battles of the entire
You know, let's be careful with this clips, but gosh, it's horrible and it's sad. You know, we're talking about people that I can't imagine living through something like this. You know, Mexico it's dangerous and it's true. People here face a lot of problems, but nothing like this. I don't think we can really imagine what's like to live something like this. Sad, since it's actually a very fertile river that was amongst the most densely populated places in the world during ancient. It's true. I mean, Syria is the home to early civilization. I mean, it's really important place when it comes to history. I can't even recall why Syria was in civil war at this point. It feels like it's been going for so long. Aleppo was one of the most populated cities on earth, but during the civil war, it fell behind Damascus. It'd be hella weird when North and South Korea really do unite as a country. I do. I think there's a lot of people that think they are not going to reunite precisely for that. I mean, imagine reunited one of the wealthiest countries on earth and one of the poorest countries on earth. That must be an incredibly difficult task. Imagine all the kids who had to grow up during now nearly 11-year-long war, who are adults now. True. I mean, just your childhood is now, it's war. That's all you can remember for your country. And gosh, you just gotta feel really bad. It sucks. It's one of the worst conflicts on earth. I don't even know exactly what led to the Syrian war, but it has to be.
21st century was under siege. Both sides attacked airstrikes.
I'm gonna be very careful with the clips, but yeah, he's gonna be promoting his Nebula series. Oop. Yeah, gosh, well, that was horrible. We ended on a really sad note, and man, it just really sucks, man. I saw that this guy, what is it? I'm sure we have it right here. He just uploaded a video about the invasion of Ukraine. I want to hear his takes. There's been times in Korea's past where North and South have been split for centuries. True, I don't think, yeah. Here's my take on like North and South Korea. I personally don't think they are going to unite. Not only because, like you said, there have been times in the past where the Koreas have been split. So it's not like a new thing. But it's just the culture is so different. Like imagine all the propaganda that people in North Korea have been fed on for so long now, for years, decades, many decades, what, 60, 70 years? Imagine what the shock would be, you know, if they united to with South Korea. Just be pretty fucking insane. There's also the economic argument, right? South Korea is one of the wealthiest countries in the world, and North Korea is very poor. You know, how could you do that logistically? I don't know. Yeah, North was actually doing better for most of that time. Makes sense. All right, let's. What do you guys want to watch first? We can watch this video about Ukraine, or we can watch this video about Taiwan, which both seem pretty good. But I don't know. Let's watch this one first.
As of this video's writing in January 2022, the world watches the tiny island of Taiwan off the coast of China. As we collectively...
Because a lot of people are talking about Ukraine right now, but not a lot of people talking about Taiwan.
Hold our breath, we ask the question of if the unimaginable is possible.
What if
Could
there's
the US
war?
and China have a war? This is a video to analyze how likely a war between the two is, what could start it, and how worried we should be. This video is meant to look inside the war rooms of what both the US and Chinese government are thinking, seeing their trade-offs and tensions over a possible war.
You should watch Johnny Harris' version of the Ukraine-Russia situation. Yeah, we can watch that. Now, guys, give me just a few minutes. I have to go to the bathroom. You know, just straight up. But hopefully, you guys can stay with me. I'm gonna be right back. It just, you know, your boys gotta go to the restroom. So. All right, sorry about that, guys. I don't know, you guys were talking about something, you know? But thank you for waiting. Everything's good. And let's start with the Taiwan issue, you know, which is the most interesting video. With the falling popularity of the government of Hong Kong started, it's one of the oldest tricks in the book to distract people with a patriotic sport of potential war. If you guys are talking about Russia, then I totally agree with that, you know? Russia is in trouble, and I mean like hardcore in trouble. Russia's finances aren't well. We're expecting as well a demographic collapse of Russia. So I do think this is all a distraction to like make Putin and his government look good. The war will only happen if it be a quick and easy, maybe several years ago, back in 2014 or something. The UK is sending economic and military aid to Ukraine. The PM traveled to Ukraine on February 1st to meet the Ukrainian government and British military advisors working with the Ukrainian military. But not today. Yeah, Ukraine is armed to the teeth with Western weapons. And I'm sure NATO itself is willing to help Ukraine, not with troops on the ground, but money and a lot of weapons. So it's not going to be an easy war. And definitely Russia, you know, maybe they have the capability of going through the war and winning, of course, but not to keeping Western or Eastern Ukraine or whatever to like as a puppet state, you know? You know what I'm saying? But let's look. Will the U.S. and you know what? Fuck it. Let's watch the other one first. You know, we're already talking about Ukraine, so might as well.
The annexation of Ukraine is inevitable.
So this is from Monsieur C, which is someone that I have disagreed with in the past, and he seems to have a little bit more conservative views than mine. However, you know, he makes interesting videos, so.
Ukraine stands at a point of crucial importance for Russia
Why
on one
not?
side and all those who would seek
Why
to
the fuck
tame or
not?
challenge Russia on the other. For as long as Russia has existed with rivals to its west, it has sought to place distance between said rivals and its crucial heartlands. These heartlands are contained entirely within the European plain, a flat land which the West could theoretically funnel into full force with few natural barriers to stop them. The fall of the Soviet Union fractured Russia's historic imperial domain and has left it in its most geographically vulnerable state in centuries, still possessing a massive domain to oversee and protect with a relatively low population for its size, and facing potential enemies across every border. Post-collapse, Russia sought rapprochement with the West now that the ideological divide was seemingly torn down, but Russia questioned and felt threatened by Western expansion into their former domain, as well as by the continuing coldness that lingered in Russia-Western.
Which, I mean, that argument is so dumb. I think he's not agreeing with this argument, but why is Russia afraid of NATO? What the fuck's NATO gonna do, bro? NATO is never gonna invade Russia, so what are they afraid of? The thing Russia wants, they want to be able to either invade or place puppet governments in places like Belarus, in places like Ukraine, in places like Moldova. That's what they want. They want influence, which, you know, I think it's fucking annoying. When are you going to react to the 1992 Atlantic hurricane season? We're going to do the Ukraine one, which is this one. We're going to do the Taiwan. And after that one, I promise I still keep it in mind. I'm not forgetting about it. But yeah, dude, I just think it's fucking stupid, you know?
Relations. Thus, it is, of course, its westernmost lands, its heartlands, which it is most concerned with protecting from what it recognizes as the encroaching West. Following the fall of the Soviet Union, Russia managed to maintain a hold over some of its breakaway states through economic, military, and political arrangements. But perhaps most important of all was Belarus, whose location allowed it to act as a buffer between Russia and much of the European Union.
It's similar to the Monroe Doctrine, I guess so, but Russia is not America, you know? Like, America can enforce any claim they want. Russia is a weak former empire, which the people are poor. It's a militaristic state. It's a surveillance state. It's very authoritarian, right? One of the most dangerous places to be a journalist. Like, I don't think Russia and America are even comparable.
To regain Ukraine, or at least strategic parts of it, would further reinforce Russia's western defense and allow it to shift its focus elsewhere, some believing that shift to be eastward toward challenging China and Iran for dominance in Asia, while others fear Russia's focus would turn toward the EU member states along the Baltic, threatening a direct war between Russia and Western Europe, in which Russia would then be in a more advantageous and secure position. Ukraine, however, instead of pursuing closer relations with Russia, has focused on Western alliance prospects instead. Russia, despite early hesitations, has since expressed its willingness to accept Ukrainian integration with the European Union, considering it the only natural direction for the country if it has in fact determined not to align with Russia.
Okay, yeah.
The EU is an economic rival but also a partner on the continent, and compromises have been achieved between the two powers before. Where Russia draws the line, however, is Ukraine's desire to join NATO, something which would place Western military assets within Ukraine and thus uncomfortably close to Russia's border. But first, let's take a moment to thank today's sponsor, Brilliant. Here on this channel, while I remember teachers who didn't Brilliant abilities master goes to remind me start Dorvin is disappear, go on, give it a back to the video into NATO or Russia may not be willing.
They feel really insecure about their position since they want to be seen as equals to the US. Exactly, I agree, you know. They also a lot of territory, maybe more than they should have during USSR's collapse. True, Russia is way bigger than it should be, you know. From the British people I've talked to, many say if Russia did invade, why should we fight? I think most people in the West are tired of war. I think that's true. But at the same time, you know, no, it's true. People are tired of war. And I think World War II left a very scary scar when it comes to war. However, you just can't let Russia do whatever they want, you know. Talking about the British people, and it's very interesting, and I don't want to make a full-on comparison, but this is similar to appeasement and World War II style appeasement. You know, Hitler already invaded Crimea, okay, and nobody did anything about it. Maybe some sanctions and whatnot, but nobody did anything about Crimea. Putin was messing up with Kazakhstan a few weeks ago. Nobody did anything, right? We just can't let, at some point, we have to be like, yo, there's this line, you can't cross it, and if you cross it, shit's gonna go down. As an American, I'm more concerned with the southern Mexico border with a lot of illegals than Russia and Ukraine. Well, that's quite a statement.
Willing to let all of Ukraine go either, whether in
and that's true. You know, you guys, Mexico is not NATO, so, you know, I'm not involved in it. But you guys as Americans and British, I get you guys are more concerned with other things. But you do realize that Russia is going to keep poking the bear until something happens. You gotta admit that Putin is desperate. And when someone is desperate, they can throw everything at the wall and be like, you know, whatever. Their territory is smaller than the Soviet Union's day, but ironically, their borders are the longest. So, yeah.
To NATO or the EU. South and eastern portions of Ukraine, including Crimea, are home to a population of some 6 million Russians, and while this population does constitute a large percentage of the overall population in each of their respective regions, in none of them but Crimea do they constitute an absolute majority. That being said, this Russian population in the south and east of Ukraine is extremely politically active, and unlike northwestern portions of Ukraine, are attempting to pull the country toward closer relations with Russia. The Russians regard these southeastern lands as historically theirs, and in reality they do share history. What we'd call Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine today first coming into existence as the loose union of the Kievan Rus in the late 9th century. Even then it was a rivalrous and internally divided state, and this ultimately led its land to be dominated by the
Belarus has been historic. Oh shit! Oh fuck!
Successfully reunite many of the Rus states under its leadership.
I was it's soon. Yeah, sorry about that, guys. Fucking hell.
This Russian population in the south and east of Ukraine is extremely politically active, and unlike northwestern portions of Ukraine, are attempting to pull the country toward closer relations with Russia. The Russians regard these southeastern lands as historically theirs, and in reality they do share history. What we'd call Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine today first coming into existence as the loose union of the Kievan Rus in the late 9th century. Even then it was a rivalrous and internally...
Which, if you think about it, you know, with that, you know, I'm just like the America state... is in right now, and Joe Biden and COVID and all that. Americans don't care what's happening in Europe. That's exactly what happened in World War I and World War II. America wasn't concerned about what was going on in Europe. And I think we found multiple times that appeasement and appeasing a tyrant like Vladimir Putin isn't the way. You know, I'm trying to sound like an ass when I say the illegals, but I'm talking about the ones from Central America crossing the borders illegally. Yeah, I can understand that. I'd be genuinely worried about the Ukraine situation if dumb people are in control, which the Cuban crisis had with JFK. Hindsight is 2020 though, so we...
divided state, and this
It's
ultimately
just,
led its land to be dominated by the invading Mongols.
I don't think, by the way, of course, I don't think we're gonna get into like World War III, and I don't think nukes are gonna be involved. But I think this is there's a lot of tension, and people should care about this, especially when you live in Europe.
But the Rus Principality of Muscovy would rise up and successfully reunite many of
I
the
can at
Rus
least
states
vouch
under
against
its
the British
leadership,
PM
giving
going
rise to
over
Russian
that in that
property.
regard.
The lands of the Ukraine were not yet among the lands reunited by Russia, however, and they instead found themselves under the control of Poland, Lithuania in the northwest and the Turks to the south. So would they remain for roughly 3 centuries before the Ukrainian population rebelled against Polish-Lithuanian rule to unite with Russia instead, with whom they felt more familiar. In the eyes of Ukraine, they had brought themselves under the protection of an essential relative, while for Russia, they felt as though they had finally brought these
America entered World War II
Rus
because
people
of
back
Pearl
under the
Harbor.
rightful guidance
Yeah,
the
of
united
course, but
Russia.
at the end of the day,
And
they
as
were
such,
involved.
efforts at Russification were taken up in Ukraine to reintegrate the state and do away with any foreign influences that might have
Like, you know, they were sending weapons to the Allies anyways, so they were involved in the war before necessarily joining. Plus,
taken roots since
well, no, that's it.
This Russification proved successful in some regions, though in others only fueled Ukrainian resentment toward Russia and emphasized a sense of uniqueness to the Ukrainian identity as something wholly different from that of Russia. This resentment was only intensified by World War I, the Russian Civil War, the Great Famine, World War II, and the subsequent decades of Russo-communist rule until the USSR's ultimate collapse.
Ukraine has been through a lot.
Attempts were made at rapprochement between Russia and the Ukraine. However, greater Ukrainian desires for integration with the West made clear that Russia could not depend upon the state's long-term cooperation in the pursuit of mutual security, and as relations between the two broke down, Russia opted to resolve its relationship and dependency upon Ukraine through alternative means. In the 2010s, upon Ukraine's pro-Russia government refusing to sign the European Union-Ukraine Association Agreement, protests broke out which escalated to the point of revolution, which ousted the sitting president in favor of a more pro-Western replacement.
Horrible.
In response, pro-Russian protests erupted across the south and east. Russia seized upon this opportunity to invade and annex Crimea, and lend support to other pro-Russian separatist regions in the east. Now confident of Ukraine's future as a part of the West, Russia is left with few options to both secure its border and bring what it considers historic and ethnically Russian lands back under its control. Thus, military force is now on the table. In a direct conflict between Russia and Ukraine, there is no question that Russia would emerge victorious. Russia boasts superior capabilities across every metric. On land, sea, or air, in population, in resources, and technology, Ukraine simply does not stand a chance. Certainly, Ukraine has been bolstering their defenses in recent years.
Yeah, I agree. I think they really fear America.
But still, this does not even come close to leveling the playing field. The most often used arguments in defense of Ukraine's ability to fend off Russian conquest are twofold. Firstly are Ukraine's allies. It's assumed that should Russia initiate a direct invasion
America
of Ukraine,
and the European Union. Real hot take here. Oh no. I feel Crimea shouldn't keep being shown as Ukrainian. It's like showing the CPP with Taiwan. It's not a politically correct to represent who holds what territory. True. I mean, it's true. Russia controls Crimea, so, you know, it is what it is. However, it happened so recently, you know, 2014, and the annexation is not recognized, I think, I don't know, but by a lot of countries. So you're right, but at the same time, it is a hot take. You know, you're right with that. It is a hot take.
Unfortunately for Ukraine, this does not appear to be the case. The United States, fresh off the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan and the failure of that 2-decade-long conflict, is the most hesitant it has been in decades to involve itself in a foreign conflict. Moreover, this would be a war that directly
And that's the thing, right? People don't care about what's going on in Ukraine. And I've heard a lot of people are like, well, you know, going to war for Ukraine is not worth it. And you're right, it's not worth it. But at the same time, where are we going to draw the line, you know?
Hits the United States up.
Are we going to let Putin just bully us into submission? We're going to let Putin literally bully us into getting what he wants. There has to be a line drawn somewhere, and Ukraine is an independent nation. If they want to join NATO, they can do it. They're independent. Russia shouldn't have given Crimea to Ukraine back then. We could have avoided. True, you know.
Not some secondary world power, but a European great power. Something the US has not done since World War II. Now, Biden said back in December, quote, "The idea the United States is going to unilaterally use force to confront Russia invading Ukraine is not in the cards right now, but there will be severe consequences. Those consequences appear to be purely economic and political, with the most radical action proposed being to lock Russia out of various international organizations. This does not appear to intimidate the Russians, who have long expressed dissatisfaction with these Western-led global institutions, to the point of proposing the establishment of..."
Yeah, there's a few things that could be done financially. For example, leaving Russia outside international banking. That was an option talked about. Europe consumes a lot of Russian gas, so they could put tariffs, or they can consume gas from somewhere else, right? America was talking about subsidizing gas to the EU, so they don't need Russian gas. There's a lot of measures that could really, really starve Russia. But if Russia did take over most of Ukraine, they would probably have a hard time holding it. I agree with that, since it's a land full of anti-Russian, heavily armed populations. I hate how what countries recognize is seen as the only metric border for change. That's true. We have plenty border changes in 2011, but not recognized by most governments.
Various Eastern partners.
Also, international
As of late
organizations
January,
like the
people are
UN.
pointing to what has been perceived as a pivot by the United States from economic and political deterrence to proposals for increasing American military presence in Eastern Europe as a sign that direct American intervention is not off the table. But the reality of this would almost certainly be nothing more than a defensive tactic should the Russo-Ukrainian conflict spill over into the NATO states of Poland, Hungary, Slovakia, Romania, and the Baltics, and only in such a circumstance would war between Russia and the West break out. The Russians are very aware of this and likely will not make any provocations outside Ukraine to threaten an actual Western intervention.
Yeah.
Truly, the only way by which Ukraine could derive direct military assistance from the West would be through alliances with individual states, say Poland or Romania. However, these states have very much to lose from such action, and again risk the outbreak of a much larger war through NATO, or no longer being guaranteed the security of NATO because they willingly made themselves a belligerent. As far as Western Europe goes, there is great hesitance to trigger a war with Russia, as such a war would see Europe heavily dependent upon American military involvement. As we've gone over before, American contributions to NATO have allowed Western Europe to dial back their own military spending, resting secure that the US will provide adequate support. However, that's no longer proving sufficient for this modern age, and the EU has thusly begun working toward establishing a united army.
Europe is gonna be needing to spend some more cash on that army. I was looking for a map on Crimea's recognition. I just found out on the subreddit of Our Ukraine. It's doing a prediction tournament for which month Russia might invade. Yo, that's awesome, bro. Let's try to look on that. Ukraine. There we go. Is this the one? This is probably not the one, but gosh, it'd be so fucking funny to see it. Oh no. This is the one.
Of its own, but until that day comes, large-scale European military action against Russia is highly unlikely. Now,
Caspian Report just released a video on what a Russian invasion might look like. At the top there, it's predictions live. Oh shit. Oh, there we go. Oh shit. I wonder what's the winner. Should we vote? There's 3.4 thousand players in one prediction. Let's see. Oh, I can't vote. I think I have to log in. When will Russia invade Ukraine again on a larger scale? I think they're gonna do it like maybe March, April. Of course, I think right now it's winter, right? So conditions must be pretty rough. But God, I don't know if you guys can see. There we go. There it is. My option will not invade. I think it's gonna invade. I think it's pretty likely that they are gonna invade between March and April. That's my prediction. April. If I had to vote, I would go for April.
secondly, it's argued that if Russia were to conquer all or part of Ukraine, an insurgency would emerge and force Russia to withdraw. Russia sees Ukraine as a long-term investment. On a long enough timeline, Europe will develop an army, Ukraine will join the EU and NATO, and whether or not the United States are involved at all, a war between Europe and Russia may break out. When that day comes, Russia wants its defenses to stand as secure as possible, and that cannot be achieved with Ukraine Russia won't involved at all. A war between Europe and Russia may break out.
But why? Why would a war between Europe and Russia break out? It just doesn't make any fucking sense. Like, Europe buys a shit ton of oil and particularly gas from Russia, right? They both benefit from their relationship. Russia culturally is pretty much European. I just don't understand why would Russia think, or why would Russia go for war against Europe? It just doesn't make any fucking sense. Economically, politically, socially, it doesn't make any fucking sense. Why would Russia get into a war with Europe? If anything, they should be closer to Europe. It's just, post-Cold War bullshit, Russia being a little scared dog, trying to attack anything that gets close to it. When Russia invades Ukraine, that's when China will finally take over Taiwan, because all the focus... Yeah, that's true. That's what I'm scared of, unfortunately.
When that day comes, Russia wants its defenses to stand as secure as possible, and that cannot be achieved with Ukraine protruding into its heartland as it currently does. If Russia must fight an insurgency for a year, 5 years, or 10 years, it will do so to secure its border against a greater threat later down the line. It's what
the Russian economy will keep collapsing.
Russia recognizes that this is the time to stabilize and correct any weakness in their border, especially now while the great powers are so hesitant to fight. If the stakes are high, Russia might settle for annexing only lands with a significant Russian population. Holding these lands as opposed to the whole of Ukraine would be relatively simple, as the risk of a large insurgency forming is relatively low. Annexing the whole of Ukraine, including disputed Transnistria, would be the most difficult, as Ukrainians would have nowhere to go, radicalizing the population and contributing to a massive insurgency movement that would take years to quell. Strategically, Russia's best bet would be to annex the entire eastern portion of the country with the Dnieper River as the western frontier, providing the Russian south with a significant natural barrier against invasion. Western Ukraine remains autonomous.
That do make sense. I think this might be what we will end up looking at. There's no limit for the meat grinder. There's money to be made by military contractors and Mer Group, and the poor ain't gonna revolt. They don't care enough. Maybe, I don't know. I do feel that a lot of Ukrainians have very anti-Russian views. And, imagine being bullied by Russia for centuries. I mean, you might not stand for it. It does make kind of sense. Russia is already under sanctions, and they invade the sanctions would be crippling. That's true. The cost of war is very elevated. The cost of an invasion is elevated. And the cost of keeping a puppet state, it's very elevated. So Russia's not going to be able to stand for long. It does make kind of sense because Europe goes to war like it's an Olympic hobby. Sometimes, particularly in the past. The US and the UK invaded Russia in 1918. So World War I. I didn't know that. When UK was in the UN, Macron hated the British. God slut. Well, keeping the tradition alive of the Russian and the French and the British hating each other. Yeah, Russia might be scared of being influenced by the West, and yet they're very politically similar, and actually Western allies like Poland and Hungary. It's true. I just don't get it. I don't get why the Russian government, because I don't think the people feel like this that much, are so scared of the West. Like, oh, NATO, is this some sort of ghost that's gonna... No, dude. No. You're just screwing yourself up.
Pursue its European
That's a reality.
While many in eastern Ukraine flee westward. Certainly an insurgency could still emerge, but unlike a total conquest scenario,
it's fucking
conquest
stupid.
Up to the Dnieper does not produce a massive disgruntled population with no choice but to fight.
And again, you gotta feel bad for the Ukrainians.
The pieces of their life and move to the west, as would the government, eventually recognizing the east is not something worth warring over, though they might passively support a resistance movement until it was ultimately suppressed by Russia. Is the annexation of Ukraine inevitable? Perhaps not entirely, but it is very probable. Russia's motive and ability is simply too great for them not to act on this opportunity sooner rather than later, though that...
I agree. They invaded Russia during the Civil War. Their imperialism is even Western-like. Russia and Europe have always been enemies, like England and Scots and Welshmen. True. It's just historical stuff, man, that I personally think it's just a bunch of bullshit, I think Russia would benefit, actually, from closer relations with the West. Most Russians are actually against the Putin regime. They obviously can't say that because, you know, yeah. True. Let's watch Taiwan. Will Taiwan spark a US-China conflict? I don't know. I think it's possible. Although here we get into the same problems than with Ukraine. Is going to war for Taiwan worth it? And for a lot of people, it's not worth it.
Conflicts define world history, and war captures all of our imagination. Wars lead a country with conflict.
All right. Yeah, we get it. We get it. Taiwan #1. Yesterday, the Royal Air Force and the Norwegian Royal Air Force scrambled as a small fleet of Russian bombers in the North Sea. Ooh, that's scary, man. It's crazy how Russia and America were friends when Russia had Vladimir Putin. The Chinese perspective.
The Chinese stand astride the era of the fastest economic growth in all of history. They went from being a poverty-stricken nation 40 years ago, economically on par with African countries, to by some measurements being the largest economy in the world. Due to this meteoric rise, China's bursting with energy and confidence right now. China's rise has been so fast that it hasn't caught up politically, and the Chinese don't even control their own neighborhood. Let's briefly compare it to America, which is surrounded on both sides.
There we go. Canada, American client state. Holy shit. American client state. Mexico is other American allies here. Effectual enemies. Well, in Taiwan's case, Japan, India, and other Asian countries say they would protect Taiwan. Really?
And basically
that's interesting.
Has its entire hemisphere as some degree of satellite, with a couple notable exceptions. China's bordered by Vietnam and India that despise it, and our American allies, alongside Russia to the north that's a completely untrustworthy ally. Even its allies like North Korea, Kazakhstan, and Burma are unstable and don't even like the Chinese that much. When you look at China's actions, you can see the result of this geographic insecurity, in that America could hypothetically sail right up to the Chinese coastline, but at the same time, the historic insecurity that comes from China's century of humiliation. Under the Qing dynasty 200 years ago, China believed itself to be the greatest nation in the world, but from 1840 to 1945, China faced defeat and humiliation at the hands of Western powers in Japan, with death tolls around 150 million, if you count disease and famine. It's impossible to
The only country that likes China is North Korea. That's absolutely true.
The Chinese feel the need to regain the honor they
And it's very dangerous because, you know, there's always talks about China being a global superpower and whatever. If they truly want to be a superpower, they need to control or at least influence a little bit more their own neighborhood. And they aren't doing it. So that's very dangerous for them.
Humiliations by pushing for symbolic victories like Taiwan or the split.
Man.
In of themselves don't matter a tremendous amount on the international
China is an
stage.
honor culture.
Something that's also really key is the symbolic importance Taiwan has is that it's run by the old Chinese Nationalist Party, which the Chinese Communist Party gained power from in the Civil War 80 years ago. The Communist and Nationalist parties sort of justify their existence in opposition to the other.
Yep.
Thus, it's also considered important to the Communist Party's honor that Taiwan is seized. At the same time, Taiwan's a model for another trajectory of Chinese civilization, one that's democratic and richer than the communist, which is a threat to the Chinese Communist Party's legitimacy. China's more afraid of Taiwan as a symbol to people in
Japan has been growing its military for a few years for a time like this. That's very interesting and again, very symbolic as well. When was the last time Japan had a large army? World War II. So that just got to show you how shit's gonna go down eventually. China even lost to Vietnam. That's true when they tried to invade. You know, damn. You know, we're all defeated by Vietnam at some point, you know. Catch-22, though, they need the foreign outage to boost nationalism internally so they stay in power. Yeah, China has no friends, only economic partners. That's true. China doesn't have a lot of friends, especially like America, for example.
Than the tiny island that it really is. When Westerners look at China, we tend to see its strength, and that's largely what the Communist Party wants us to see, but we don't see its weaknesses. A situation I go into depth in this video, the link to which is in the description. We don't see China's horrible demographic structure, for example. How their birth rates are...
Did we watch this video, guys? I don't think we watched this. Maybe we should. But we watched, and if you guys are watching on YouTube, for example, the Chinese Reckoning series, and that was amazing.
Quarter of what it should be, and they'll have half their population in 80-year time. Alternatively, there are immense class, systemic, and resource problems. China, like most newly industrialized nations, is burning with energy, but it's also exhausted.
China's only scary because of numbers alone and not much else.
It's no coincidence that the U.S. fought a civil war during its industrialization. Europe was
just came out
after industrialization, with world wars and Japan in the same camp. The Chinese Communist Party stayed in power for so much longer than other international communist parties by implicitly buying support from the Chinese people with economic.
Literally buying
As China
support.
becomes a more mature economy, and it also gets involved in trade wars, it slows its economic growth. And as I talk about in this video, the government pushes for both nationalism and oppressive authoritarian measures as a way to keep...
Gosh, look at that. Housing sales, 25.6% up? Which is insane, dude, when you consider the housing crisis that they are facing.
Its own population. When China pushes for Taiwan,
everyone against that. When Japan get pissed and bust out the real military power.
Like a drug-induced burst of confidence that comes from a profound insecurity over its position. The parallels in World War I are horrifying. There's this thing called Thucydides' trap, which is basically that a dominant power is incentivized to try to crush a rising power before said rising power is strong enough to overtake the dominant one. There was a study that found there were 15 examples of this over the last 500 years, and that 12 of them resulted in war. From this logic, the US should fight a war with China before China is capable of overtaking America. For decades, the US and China worked together since they could make a...
This is kind of true, but I really don't like this argument that much because people seem to forget that we live in a globalized economy, right? Why would China and the US go to war if China sells its products to the US, right? Like China is the biggest exporter of products in the world and the US is the largest consumer market in the world. It's like the perfect relationship, right? America is full of Chinese goods and China loves selling its goods to the US. So it just financially, from an economic point of view, it doesn't really make a lot of sense that China and the US go to war for either of them, right? If war between the West and China happened, I could see India doing a lot of fighting. So yeah, that's true. I could also see that. They have border issues or territories in dispute, so I could see that happening.
A lot of money from trading with each other. The US ignored China's rise to great power as well as American industry's relocation there. However, starting a little bit with Obama and really ramping up with Trump, the United States started to see China more as a rival. This was driven partially by the social unrest.
Exactly, yeah. They both lose.
But also by China's greater geopolitical predominance and aggression. Thus,
and I think they both understand that, you know? In a war, both of them lose.
America's changed views on China. It's been making more
especially now that America has a lot of supply chain issues.
Taiwanese stances. Although Taiwan in real terms has been an American ally since the beginning, the US has recognized Communist China as the real China in official documents in a weird dance. Starting with Trump, the US has been breaking diplomatic taboo.
Look, in blue, the countries that recognize Taiwan, and you got only what? Paraguay, Guatemala. Is this Honduras or Nicaragua? I don't know. I can't remember.
It was like the US president taking direct phone calls from the Taiwanese one. For the Chinese coming from a shame-based culture, this is an attack upon their honor as a nation. The US sees a China that's spreading its influence, and that scares America, which forces the US's hand in a
Yeah, look, again, mostly American allies. You got India, you got Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, Indonesia, Australia, Taiwan, or as they call it, Chinese Taipei. You got Japan, Korea.
The U.S. maintains an alliance structure that includes Taiwan, but also the whole Pacific perimeter around China, including Indonesia, Vietnam, the Philippines, South Korea.
And then the South China Sea thing gets very interesting.
Is that they're maintained more by pride than by military force. Thus, if the U.S. let China take Taiwan without a fight, that would precipitate a crisis in America as the world's policeman, which might result in a collapse of the already weak U.S.
I don't think economic interdependence is enough to always prevent war, since humans aren't rational. At times we're motivated by fear, pride, anger. That is true, but you don't only have economic interdependence. You also have the fear of mutual destruction, right? That's when it comes to nuclear powers. So you got Russia, China, the U.S. of course, and then you got like France, the U.K. So you combine economic interdependence with the fear of mutual destruction. It's just very unlikely. I'm not saying it's impossible. Maybe it could happen, right? Like you said it, humans are not very rational at times, but I just think it's very, very, very unlikely. And I think it's more likely, it's something like the Ukraine thing, where China goes to war with Taiwan and we just supply them with weapons. That or something like the Cold War, where we have a lot of proxy wars happening. I think that's also realistic. The U.S. and China could have a war, but I think it's very, very unlikely. Basically, all former imperial Japanese colonies are allies of America. Yeah, that's funny, isn't it? Thailand was also a strong ally for a long time. I'm not pro-China. I think the Chinese Communist Party is evil, but America has an incredible evil side to which should not be ignored. No, I totally agree with you. America has a side that's not particularly great, but when I always ask people, who would you rather be the global superpower, China or America? America is bad, and it has been imperialistic many times. But China is a very hardcore surveillance state, right? China has very few individual liberties, if any. America, you do have freedom of speech in America, and that's pretty great. Sometimes people have it for granted, but I think China is worse, honestly.
Or U.S. allies leaving the American alliance structure, possibly going to China, which might look to be a more stable ally and the power of the future. If I was part of the American leadership, I would try to isolate China, gradually strangling it rather than being direct.
Okay. Potential American allies, the Russians and the Chinese are allies of convenience. They dislike each other in real terms. Russia could easily flip to be a U.S. ally. True. Central Asia's governments like China.
Major problem of all American international policy across
no country is perfect.
It's
lesser of two evils. Yeah.
Americans are always either in or out. The US would probably do something big and brash just out of its own nature. Also, like China and frankly everywhere else in the world, America's torn by its own class, political, and systemic issues that make effective political action more difficult. America's not united at home. And
America's facing a lot of shit,
actions abroad will be more foolish and ineffective. The question I'm going to ask here is what factors normally create wars across history, and what's different about the US and China's struggle from the norm? I normally find it annoying when people say wars won't happen anymore. This is since that argument's been used so many times before in history, and it was
I just used that argument, bro.
Time. People thought that global trade made wars unprofitable, which is the argument people use today and before World War I. However, there is one point that has to be taken very seriously, which is nuclear weapons. The United States and Russia both have over 6,000 nukes, which means they could end modern civilization as we know it. This is the biggest reason why the Cold War never became a real war, in that nuclear weapons act as a deterrent against full-scale industrial war. However, the complication here is that China...
Yeah, I use the trade argument and I stand by it, but at the same time, I think the nuclear argument is also very powerful.
Only has 300 nukes, most of which are in regional missiles and so can't even hit North America. That means that the US has over 60 times as many nukes, which makes it look like the US has overwhelming superiority. However, the US, due to being a nation with at least a little bit of moral consciousness, is unwilling to wipe the nation of China off the face of the earth if they don't nuke America first. Both the US and China have signed treaties saying they won't use nuclear weapons, and that actually plays into China's self-interest, since they have a larger population industrial base, which would serve them better in a conventional war. However, even if the US and China decide not to use nukes, nukes are still on the table. The idea that the human race and hundreds of millions of lives could be at stake could make the situation more tense, just to say the least. If China were to invade Taiwan, the US might not intervene just due to fear of the possibility of nuclear weapons being used. So, nukes might prevent a war.
And that's what we were talking about, and that's what's happening with Ukraine. It's the exact same thing. It's not about avoiding war as so much asking, is it worth it? And for a lot of people in the US, Taiwan wouldn't be worth it. Just like Ukraine isn't worth it, right?
War, but they also might not. Thus, industrial wars only break out when one society views the survival of their society at risk. The American Civil War happened when the South knew that if things kept going the way they were, the industrializing North would abolish slavery democratically. World War I broke out when the British and French knew that if things kept going the way they were, that the Germans would dominate them, and the Germans had the same anxiety about the Russians. Both Japan and Germany's economies would have imploded if they didn't start World War II, thus probably removing their regimes from power. The brilliant historian David Hackett Fisher found that you can predict collapses in world systems with pretty easy regularity. I made a video about it here, but we can basically check out all the boxes pretty easily. High inflation and inequality, rising cost of living and declining standard of living, all of which cause international tension and civil wars. We basically know there's going to be a lot of wars in the next couple decades, but the question is whether the big worst case scenario of a full US-China war happens. The problem here is that the world system at this point, and you see this in both the US and China, is that both countries are crushed by their own internal problems, and so they try to tilt the world system to favor them, either by creating tariffs or shutting off immigration for America or gaining political power for China. However, when everyone needs concessions from the international system to keep their countries functioning, the world system just dies. The previous world crises that have happened have combined both internal and external wars. An example of this is how France fought the 30 Years' War and then collapsed into civil war. Or, in the 18th century, France had their own revolution and then fought the Napoleonic Wars.
It's all about
Russia
France,
fought
baby.
World War I, then collapsed into civil war. I think given China's massive demographic problems, there's no way the Communist Party stays in power. If their population is supposed to have by the end of this century, that means they're...
I personally don't think Taiwan is a hill the U.S. is willing to die on. I agree. This is evident since they don't recognize them as a real China since the 70s. True, it's what we're talking about. It's simply not worth it. You heard about the incident of that basketball player was racially attacked in China in the CBA. I know. I had no idea. There's a lot of racism in China against foreigners in general, so
going to have a remarkable
it wouldn't
social
surprise me,
collapse.
but
The
it
problem
sucks.
here is the sheer amount of chaos in modern world system makes it very difficult to predict actual results. As an example, a conflict between Chinese and American allies in a place like the Middle East or Eastern Europe could spiral into a war involving the US and China. It's hard to say what the exact conditions would be in a US-China war
American
or a
allies,
Chinese invasion
yo.
of Taiwan. So we're going to start here with the assumption that China does invade Taiwan. What would happen afterwards? Let's say that the Chinese fleet crosses the ocean to invade Taiwan. Most military projections in the US would say that China would be able to conquer Taiwan relatively easy, and I'm assuming Chinese war games say roughly the same. A major problem is that we don't have the important classified details that the Chinese and American governments do on combat details. I know some of the weapons...
Which, yeah, China would probably win, but it wouldn't be necessarily an easy war. I think Taiwan has a very respectable army, and of course, it's not like Russia and Ukraine, where it's just land. They have to cross water, and operations like D-Day, for example, they take a lot of money, a lot of skill, a lot of preparation, and an amphibian invasion is never easy, right? So it's not going to be super easy. According to the map he showed about U.S. allies, Ireland isn't our friend. Oh, really? That's weird, yeah. Maybe neutrality, it's probably that, because Switzerland and Finland are also like white. But I think the people of Ireland are probably really good when it comes to like America, right? I think China only political hates US, but that's it. They are more willing to cooperate with us than Russia. Yeah, that's true. I mean, the thing about China is that they really like cash, you know, and they know that the US is all about the cash.
Is that we don't have the important classified details that the Chinese and American governments do on combat details. I know some of the weapon systems, but not how effective they are, for example. No major war was fought like
exactly. Ireland is neutral.
People calculate the importance of variables incorrectly. As an example, I've heard the Chinese have the ability to jam satellite signals off the coast of China that would destroy US naval communications, and that their missile force is extremely impressive. However, I'm not sure how effective either of these are in the real world. It's also totally possible that the US would be able to defeat the Chinese landing force given the US's much more powerful navy. Another factor is that amphibious invasions of well-defended coastlines are extremely difficult as a rule.
Yep.
especially with a nation as well armed and defended
Exactly.
as Taiwan.
Exactly.
As another possibility, once the Chinese reach the beachheads, it's entirely unclear how effective the Chinese military really is. As a rule, Chinese organizations tend to be pretty binary in either being extremely competent and efficient or mired in corruption.
We could block aid, then similar to what the UK did to Germany in World War I, it could cripple them, but could potentially escalate conflict. Sadly, new war could happen.
Largely determined by how honest the top leadership is.
My great-grandmother is 100 and lived under the Blitz. She always said to me, I hope your generation never has to see the things mine has seen. Wow, talk about a powerful message. I hope your generation never has to see what mine has to see. Oof. Brutal, but unfortunately true. I also hope that too. You can see the pain in her eyes when she said that. Imagine what she has seen. It's always very interesting to talk to the generation of World War II or World War I even.
Alternatively, it's unclear how effective the Taiwanese military is, either given that I've heard some reports saying it's really good, and others saying they have an outdated and foolish military doctrine. The biggest and primary question we have is whether the US would get involved to protect Taiwan. On one side, the Chinese attack on Taiwan is a direct attack on an American ally, and more abstractly the American world order, which might result in U.S. allies leaving America or the dollar world system.
I really don't think so.
On the other hand, starting a world war that would kill at least tens of millions of people over a tiny island is an expensive decision. Although it's really a coin toss, I think under the current Biden
Democrats,
the U.S. is less likely to protect the island. I honestly think that the most likely option America would push for if China seizes Taiwan is that America blocks off trade to China and puts the country under trade embargoes. The U.S. Navy is extremely powerful.
Well, this would be incredibly costly to the U.S. I mean, talking about supply chain issues, would the U.S. go there? Maybe, maybe not.
But the problem is that China is so dependent upon foreign trade, especially in fossil fuels from the Middle East, that it might launch into war to protect its economic survival. Some of you might be reminded of the U.S. embargo of Japan during World War II that practically forced the Japanese to declare war on America at Pearl Harbor.
True, 100%
There are two
true.
ways of thinking about this, in that either the U.S. would pursue this policy while forgetting history, and
Trump.
another that the U.S. would cynically position China
So
to start
fucking
the war
funny, dude.
in order to make China look bad on the international stage and alienate its possible allies. Which brings up the question, would China push for another target after seizing Taiwan? If Taiwan was seized, it wouldn't solve any of China's internal problems, which might mean that they would need to go after something else. If returning to China's pre-century of humiliations is important, as it is for many Chinese nationalists, then the annexation of Mongolia, or more importantly the very strategic Okinawa Islands off the south coast of Japan, which have American military bases, might become new targets.
No,
However,
I don't
to be
think
honest,
so.
I think the Chinese pushing against America that directly is unlikely. I think saber-rattling with India is more plausible. I think that if the U.S. didn't start a war over Taiwan and engage China...
U.S. corporations would cry if there was a blockade. True, absolutely. I don't think all the corporations in the U.S., I mean, we're talking about Apple, Amazon, right, Alphabet. I don't think all those corporations would be really happy about the blockade. And even U.S. consumers, you know, we consume a lot of products from China, so it'd be difficult. It wouldn't
China
be ideal.
That China would fall apart in the next few decades due to its own internal problems. I think the U.S. could put the nail in the coffin by forming allies with Russia and promoting rebellions in Central Asia to fully surround and isolate China. However, a war with China would result in tens of millions of deaths in a truly history-forming war. A war I've gone over in more detail in that video. Whatifalthist, and thanks for watching. If you enjoyed...
Woo! That was fucking good, man. I love geopolitics. I love all that shit, man. Come on. Yeah, I think we are close to war. I still don't think it's likely that we are gonna fight China or Russia directly. I don't think that we're gonna see like U.S. troops invading China or Russia. Like, come on. I think that's a little stretch. Now, maybe in a year things change and we're like, oh shit, war is actually very likely. But for now, I don't think it's gonna happen. However, we are very close to a lot of proxy wars. We have China and Taiwan, and we have Russia and Ukraine. And those two situations could really, really push some boundaries and could really affect immigration, trade, right? We're already having economic problems with some of the highest inflation levels we've faced since like the 70s. So I don't think any of that really helps. I hear every Chinese naval ship has an admiral and a CCP representative. The admiral can't do anything without consulting the Communist Party representative. Divine leadership isn't good. Yeah, if that's true, that's a really messed up decision. I'm not a naval officer or anything, but that's probably really, really tough. You need people that can make decisions quick, especially in like a very dire situation. Anyways, hey, it seems like we reached a top of like 18 viewers. That was our top. And I think we are right now at like 16, 17. I don't know. That's fucking cool, man. Thank you all so much for watching. I think we should start to create products in our nations instead of China. If a war happened, then that's a huge blow to the world economy. That's true, but it's complicated, man. Like, for example, let's say the iPhone. Where's my phone? Oh, it's over there. But let's say the iPhone is made in the US. How much of a price increase would it have, right? The iPhone and all of its parts are manufactured in China. Or other countries like Vietnam, for example. I the batteries and the displays, some of them are manufactured in maybe other countries, but you had a really important price increase if you made the iPhone in America. And how's that going to affect consumers? How's that going to affect inflation? I think it's a very complicated decision. I do think that nations have to produce some sort of some of their products have to come within their own economies, but at the same time, it's just very complicated. I'm not an economist, but it's just very complicated. How about the 1992 Atlantic hurricane season? I didn't forget, my friend. Let's do it right now. But yeah, I love economy. If you guys don't know, was gonna be my my degree, and I think I would be a good economist. But I decided to be a business owner instead. And yeah, it has been pretty good. So, as the last video of the stream, I want to thank y'all for watching. It has been really a blast. And we're going to end with a really great note. With Force 13, if you guys don't know his videos, he uploads some really cool and interesting weather videos. And especially animations. I think they're pretty great. So let's end on a pretty fun note.
The hurricane season that is the perfect example of the...
All right. Chill, my friend.
Phrase, it only takes one. The season that also brought the third recorded Category 5 hurricane to make landfall in the United States. This is the 1992 Atlantic hurricane season animation version 3.
A landfall of that size of a hurricane, that's pretty fucking interesting. Tropical storm, all right. The beginning is always very light. I think like after June is where shit starts to hit the fan, The music is pretty chill. All right, July. This is literally far away in the Atlantic. I love the zooming for that very little storm. Hurricane Andrew? Well, it's just a storm right now, is it? It's a level 1. Oh, wow, that was fast. Oh. Damn, my God. Let's watch that again. Because it goes really fast to a level 5. And then strikes the Bahamas. Strikes Miami. And southern Florida in general. It strikes again what looks like New Orleans. Or like southern Louisiana. And then it just flies away. I am the storm. Just as a side note, I do agree with that. I do agree that Vietnam has cheaper manufacturing. Places like Mexico, for example, they do have cheaper manufacturing. I think, maybe, I don't know. I haven't compared Mexico and China when it comes to manufacturing, but it's probably gonna become cheaper eventually. Storm Bunny, Hurricane Bunny. That's a nice name, Bunny. There's not a lot of people named Bunny nowadays. Look at Bermuda, bro. How scary it would be to be just like very far away from the coast, very lonely, small island. Mr. Andrew running in the 90s. True, man. Gosh, truly the infrastructure of Miami and southern Florida, I don't think they were extremely ready for it. Was I late? Did I miss geography now? Actually, you weren't. I said we were going to end on this video, but I still forgot that I have Geography Now Jamaica. So after this video, we're going to watch Geography Now Jamaica. So your timing was perfect. Hurricane Earl. No, it's a storm. Tropical storm. I wonder if he's going to show up the financial damage of Hurricane Andrew. Ooh, must be huge, man. In the billions. And he hit the Bahamas too, so... Just gotta wonder. Hurricane Francis? How would you pronounce that? This is the classical F-13 music. Hurricane Andrew is only one of 4 Category 5s to make landfall in the U.S. since records began. Holy crap, bro. You got Miami-Dade County, Key West over here. And bam. Gosh. Tropical depression oil in June caused significant rainfall in Florida. I guess the purple is the highest one. Oof. Andrew, 775 miles per hour. Damn. So Andrew made 2 landfalls. I think this one is the southern Florida one. Oh, we have 3. I think this one was the Louisiana, I think. Wow. Oh my God. Oh, dude. Wow. Oh my God. Look at that. This is unlivable. This is completely gone. You know? Wow. Just fucking morbid, you know? And the trees, of course. Oh my God. 27.3 billion, my dude. Fucking insane. You should do more history videos. I recommend Future History. It's probably my favorite channel on that subject. What do you think if we do like a specific live stream for binge watching Future History? I'd be really interested in doing that. My God, 27 billion. Oh, wow, of course. But adjusted to 2021 US dollars, that was almost 52 billion. Oh my God. I'm trying to wrap my head to that amount. $52 billion. That's the GDP of like big ass countries, you know? Gosh, fucking. That's gnarly as fuck. Deadliest storm, Andrew, with 65 casualties. Again, that's kind of a lot. All right. I agree with you guys. I'm going to do more history videos. And, you know, right now it's been a kind of a long stream. But what do you guys think if we end? By the way, this one was pretty great. You know, kudos to F13 who makes some really interesting videos. And I think I have people from the team of F13 that watch the videos. So how did you guys? Kudos for the amazing videos. And gosh, Andrew was fucking gnarly. What do you guys think if we watch Geography Now Jamaica to end the live stream? You know? So Geography Now Jamaica, this is gonna be fun. A lot of interesting culture, music, even religion like Rastafarianism, isn't it? I'm not gonna talk because I'm ignorant as fuck when it comes to other countries.
Jamaican subscriber Ashley P sent me this book of Jamaican patois poems by Luis Bennett. Here's a poem about a time a circus came to Kingston and a lion escaped from its cage. What a magic, what a mystery. Circus lion boss him bound, and the crowd don't get excited, and the crowd is safe and sound. Jamaica people grand me child, Jamaica people ball, for face.
I was excited about this specific video because I live very closely to this country, huh? They live in the Caribbean.
The king obese with everything under control. The lion bust the cage door down, the lion jumped the wall, and that's a sword.
Sup, my man? I missed you today, boy. Honestly.
Done holler out, and that's a soul done ball. The lion mingle with the crowd and prowl from west to east. The people sitting calmly and salute the king obese. I love patois.
It's time to learn geography
now. Hey everybody, I'm your host Barbs. Jamaica, probably the most iconic Caribbean
Jamaica, baby.
Mainstream pop culture. So
it is. It is very influential. And talking about Southern Florida, I think there's a lot of people from Jamaica and South Florida.
Back in the Caribbean. Don't you just love this region of the planet? First of all,
I do.
Jamaica is the 4th largest island country in the Caribbean, located west of Haiti, south of Cuba, and east of the Cayman Islands, where all the billionaires hide those wonderfully offshore bank accounts to avoid taxes. Jamaica is divided into 14 parishes, and the capital, Kingston, in itself acting as a parish. The parishes are further kind of split into 3 historic counties that don't have any administrative relevance. They are Cornwall, Middlesex, and Surrey. Yeah, with names like that, you can almost smell the British residue. The largest cities after the capital, Kingston, would be Spanish Town and Portsmouth, both in the St. Catherine Parish. However, if we're talking about outside the general Kingston area, the next largest would be Montego Bay and Mandeville, with the 3 busiest and only
a lot of tourism, right?
Kingston, Norman Manley International, Montego Bay's Sangster International, and Bosco Bell's Ian Fleming International. There was some controversy over naming that last airport because everybody was like, why don't we name it after a Jamaican person? But Prime Minister Golding was like, look, the dude kind of put Jamaica on the map, and if it wasn't for us, he wouldn't have had the inspiration to create James Bond, so suck it up, people. Now, despite being small, Jamaica still holds its ground on the disputed territory between them and Colombia, Nicaragua, and the U.S. over the uninhabited.
Fun fact, patois means rural local French. Wow.
Inhabited submerged reef sandbank areas of Bajo Nuevo and the Serranía Bank. Remember, people, the second you discover even the smallest sandbank protruding from the sea, you gotta claim it. That way you get an exclusive
islands, man.
Woohoo! Speaking of which, the country has about 30 smaller islands and islets and keys and sandbanks.
I don't know why Jamaica stole the
largest
world.
One being
the word.
Great Goat Island in the south across Moore's Pen. Now, the one thing you need to know about Jamaica and its charm is that if you come, you will notice some of the strangest place names imaginable. Each town has a little bit of a story and context, so you'll encounter things like Broke Neck Gully, Rat Trap, Betty's Hope, Rest and Be Thankful, Old Woman Savannah, See Me No More, Time and Patience, Wait a Bit, and my personal favorite, Me No Sen, You No Come. Jamaicans just like to call it as they see it. Simple, no need a trap, Betty's Hope, Rest and Be Thankful, Old Woman Savannah.
Yeah, man, let's go to a trip to Old Woman.
Savannah, See Me No More, Time and Patience, Wait a Bit, and my personal favorite, Me No Sen, You No Come. Jamaicans just like to call it as they see it. Simple, no need to overcomplicate. What should we call this place? Drop Sandwich Lagoon. Another interesting thing is that Jamaica has
Is that real?
villages,
I
which
could
are
see it.
inhabited by people descended from slaves that escaped and created their own free societies in the mountains. These villages would eventually play a strong role in Jamaica's history, and in a future episode, Sierra Leone, but you'll just have to wait like 47 years for that episode. Today, they kind of hold like a slight autonomous
That episode is
and
probably
separate role from the rest
out,
of Jamaican
right?
culture as they live in secluded areas holding on to ancient African traditions. Otherwise, some top notable spaces of interest might include Hero Circle, glistening waters with bioluminescent organisms that light up, Windsor's Fire Spring, you can literally light it on fire, Sunken Pirate
Wow.
City, Floyd's Pelican Bar made of driftwood, Dolphin Cove, the Bob Marley
Yeah, you
Museum
just gotta say, for such a small country, Jamaica has definitely a lot of tourism and a lot of very interesting and distinct culture.
Mausoleum, Dunn's River Falls, Reggae Beach, Cool Runnings Water
Napoleon III, oh boy.
Park, Mountain River Cave with Taino and Arawak paintings, Mystic Mountain Rainforest,
The Taino and
bobsledding
the
in Ochos
Arawak?
Rios, Martha Bray River with wooden rafts, and Irie Blue Hole and Secret Falls. Yeah, I'm still kind of mind blown over that fire, water, and glowing lagoon place. That's just proof that Jamaica is thriving with magical natural wonders, which brings us to... Jamaica may be small, but it is definitely loaded with natural treasures. First of all, Jamaica lies
Amen,
below the
bro.
Cayman Trough on the Nicaragua Rise, an area in the Caribbean Sea that is elevated, giving Jamaica shallower waters and richer biodiversity. This also gives them the 7th largest natural harbor in the world, Kingston Harbor. The country is also about 146 miles long, 235 kilometers, and at its widest, only about 52 miles, 84 kilometers wide. Basically, Jamaica is made up of nice valleys and plains in the west and center, sometimes referred to as cockpit country, with the small Mocho and Dry Harbor Mountains in the center. And finally, the tallest range, the Blue Mountains, with the tallest peak, Blue Mountain Peak, in the east, starting around Kingston. The longest river being the Black River on the west side, and Wallywash Pond being the largest body of water inland. Now, just like we studied in the Dominica episode, Jamaica is also home to natural mineral and hot springs, such as Blue Hole, Bubbling Springs, Milk River, Rockford Mineral Spa,
Oh,
and the
God.
Blue Lagoon. Not this
That's beautiful. I mean, I don't think I ever been to a lagoon like that, or like a natural spring. What how you what would you call it? Natural hot mineral hot springs. All right, gotcha.
this one. Although much of the island has been stripped for agriculture, wildlife is also quite prevalent, especially in
Yo,
the
talking
undisturbed
about
forests in the north and Blue
agriculture.
Mountains. Animals like
No,
bats,
I don't want to
butia,
say anything
boar,
like
and
that.
the indigenous Jamaican boa and freshwater Jamaican slider turtle can be found. Speaking of agriculture,
Foreign policy when it comes to Napoleon III. Yeah, dude. Second Mexican Empire. Franco-Prussian War.
Jamaica was primarily used by the colonists for sugar plantations. However, today all sorts of crops are grown, but most notably the ackee fruit, which
Of
actually
course,
tastes
yeah.
salty, not sweet. Ackee is used in the national dish ackee and saltfish. Otherwise,
Which I
other
think Jamaica was first a possession of the Spanish. So, yeah, and then the British, stole it, I think.
Jamaican dishes might include rice and peas, jerk chicken, chicken foot soup, manish water, steamed kalaloo, and gizzada. And I know what half of you are thinking.
That looks
yes,
good.
Let's talk ganja. Yes, we all know
Yay!
cannabis is pretty internationally
Woo!
recognized as a part
Let's
of Jamaican
go.
culture. It was actually introduced from India by indentured servants from India, which is where the word ganja comes from. It's weird because for the longest time, growing marijuana and even possessing it was illegal, even though you can literally just find plants in the middle of the forests. It wasn't until 2015 that the country voted to decriminalize and amend strict laws. Today, you are allowed to have up to 5 plants legally, more if you have a cultivator's license. Possession up to 2 ounces or 56 grams is legal, and Rastafarians are allowed to use it for religious purposes. And the Rastafarians are a whole other story. Jamaica's people are few, but incredibly world-renowned and
Let's
unique
go
in so
smoke
many
some
ways. Looks like a great time to
ganja.
discuss that in...
No, by the way, I don't really recommend people to smoke marijuana. It's not very good. And I haven't smoked for like 4 months, 5 months.
Jamaica lives by the motto, out of many, one people, attributing the unity to all the cultural pieces that have made them who they are today. First of all, the country has about 3 million people and is the 3rd largest Anglophone nation in the Americas.
Huh.
The vast majority of Jamaicans identify as black at over 90%, about 7% are mixed, and the remainder are actually mostly made up of Asians, not whites, like the Chinese and Indian Jamaicans, with whites following after, mostly descended from British colonialists, and other people groups following. And the coolest thing is, they all speak in a Jamaican accent. Here's a white guy and a Chinese guy both born in
Oh,
Jamaica.
yeah.
Come from Jamaica. We come from the western part of Jamaica. Can't really tell you where we come from down there though, if you don't know where we come from.
I'm Jamaican. Only people don't believe me. Them don't believe I come from Jamaica.
Oh.
Chinese.
Yeah, that was pretty cool, wasn't it? They use the Jamaican dollar
Yo,
as their currency. They
that
use the
was super cool, man. It'd be so fucking trippy to hear those people in real life. Congratulations. Thank you. staying sober, that's really hard.
AB American-style plug outlets, and they drive on the left side of the road. Now, even though they have a small population, Jamaica has probably made the biggest global impact for Caribbean culture out of all their neighbors.
Oh,
in the
yeah.
quickest way I can summarize their
Absolutely.
history, Tainos and Arawaks, Christopher Columbus comes in and calls it Santiago, slaves come in from Africa, Brits come in calling it Jamaica, slavery abolished in 1838. The Brits were like, dang, we need cheap labor since the slaves are free.
Why is it called Jamaica though? Because in Mexico, there's a plant. It's called, we call it in Spanish Jamaica, which is Jamaica, and it's a plant where we used it for like water and things like that, but I don't know why.
Oh yeah, let's do the same thing we did with Guyana. Come on, Indians and Chinese! Finally, Jamaica gained independence in 1962. However, they still fall under the Commonwealth as a constitutional monarchy, where Queen Elizabeth still remains the technical head of state, but nobody really sees her as like the head of state. Now, due to Jamaica's relative isolation,
Yeah, like
from the rest of
Canada,
the
right?
Antilles, Jamaica had to kind of develop their own unique style
maybe,
of
I don't
customs and traditions. For one, Christianity has played a huge role in Jamaica. Jamaica also has more churches per square kilometer than anywhere else in the world. Contrary to popular
Would
belief,
you look at that?
Rastafarianism, although started in Jamaica in the 1930s, only makes a small minority of somewhere around 5% of the population.
All
If
right,
you don't know anything
well.
about Rastafarianism, basically it's an Afrocentric belief system that takes inspiration from the Christian Bible as certain rituals and doctrines like the one we discussed in the Ethiopia episode, in which they believe that
True.
Haile Selassie was the Messiah, yada yada yada. If you're interested in learning it,
Many Asians in the Anglo and Dutch Caribbean.
just Google
That would
it.
make
I
a
wish it
lot
was
of
that
sense.
easy. I wish I could just do that for every episode. Just Google it. Jamaica. Done. Second, we all know the biggest source of global influence for Jamaica would
Music.
be, no doubt, the music. Starting in the 50s, Jamaica's ska and rocksteady precursors to the 60s reggae and dancehall melodies not only became super popular in themselves, but also paved the way for other branch genres like hip-hop and EDM. In order
Yeah.
to really appreciate Jamaican music, though, it might be wise to brush up on the part I personally find most fascinating,
Patois.
patois. Now, although in a legal sense, the official language of Jamaica is Standard Jamaican English, or SJE, many will say that technically there are
Maybe
two
he's gonna talk
languages,
about
the other being
the
Jamaican
patois
which
word.
is basically like an English Creole, much like what Haiti did with French. The thing is, Jamaican patois is kind of like a loose, feel-it-as-you-go type of language. It doesn't have an
Now, question for you, Fritos. What do you think about French from Haiti? Could you understand the French language from Haiti, or is there a noticeable difference?
official standardized format, but there are certainly universally used words, such as talawa, crosses, picnic, duppy, big up, and of course, everyone knows the classics, wagwan and irie. However, when they want to emphasize something, they like
I didn't
repeat
know
the word
that.
twice, like pasa pasa, licky licky, picky picky, and they always use like filler words.
Yeah, they
which
like
don't have
repeat
any meaning, but
twice
kinda
the
illustrates
word.
the story better. For example, okay, Jamaican geography Darren wrote this, and I'm gonna try to see if I could do it. So me go
Oh,
so
man.
pops and run a race, then me go and run hard, and me go rups flick flick, and me win it easily. I don't know how I did. That was either incredibly offensive or kind of acceptable. Oh, and if you make a Jamaican friend, chances are you will get a nickname, and it's usually based off of anything they notice from you. Yo, man, what your name?
Keith.
Nah, man, you like the broom, your name Broomy. You eat the cupcake, your name Munchie. You're raising 3 daughters in a house in San Francisco. Me go and call you Bob Saget. Like that! Anyway, we could go on explaining more about the
Which, by the way, Bob Saget just passed away, so maybe that's not the most accurate thing. Sometimes I can, but it's very different and very funny. Oh, I actually didn't know that.
various festivals, traditions, dances, or how they are the only Caribbean nation with an active hockey team, even though all the players are like literally Canadian nationals, but that'll take too long. For what it's worth, some notable people of Jamaican descent might include Michael Lee Chin, Dr. Thomas P. Leckie, Oliver Samuel, sprinters Usain Bolt, Shelly Ann Fraser-Price, and Asafa Powell, Merlin Oti, Dustin Brown, Jimmy Cliff,
Damn.
Ziggy Marley, Shaggy, Mona Hammond, Grace
Shaggy, of
Jones,
course.
Sonia Richards-Ross, Mary Seacole, Damian Marley, Sean Kingston, Portia Simpson-Miller, Marcus Garvey, Naomi Campbell, Notorious B.I.G., Patrick Ewing, Louis
Naomi Campbell and Notorious B.I.G. are from Jamaica? Holy shit. Well, the more you know.
Simone Bennett, and the most iconic Jamaican maybe of
Bob
all time, the
Marley.
master himself, Robert Bob Nesta Marley. All right, now we gotta move on and see who else likes to dance the reggae.
I mean,
with
do you remember the airport at the beginning? You know, it should be remained to like the Bob Marley International Airport. And legit, like no
If you
joke.
ask a Jamaican what Jamaicans are best at, they'll probably say something like knowing how to slow down.
Can you guys see this guy at the, this white guy, by the way, at the middle of the photo? He's smoking something,
And take it easy when life needs to. Therefore, it's not hard for other countries to like Jamaica. First of all, Jamaica has close ties to Cuba, as they have been giving scholarships and medical help for decades. Treaties and business deals have always been active.
Let's see, Mexico and Jamaica. Well, nothing really relevant, But I'm sure Mexican people love Jamaica.
They have a funny little rivalry with Trinidad and Tobago and Barbados, though, when it comes to dominating the tourism industry and sports competitions. But when they meet up as people, it's like they're brothers all over again. China keeps an eye on them, considering that they already have a noticeable Chinese minority. By the way, Tessan Chin, who won The Voice in the US, was like a...
Yeah, I know, right? A lot of Marleys, so maybe his descendants are still doing music. I honestly have no idea. Those guys run fast. Yeah, true. Mississippi just legalized medical weed. Never thought I'd see the day. Wow. Mississippi, one of the most conservative states, right? You're right. I didn't thought I'd see the day. But hey, it happened. I live in Trinidad. Oh, perfect.
Huge deal. And they have been investing like crazy for the past
Then you
few
seem to like
decades.
Jamaica.
See this as kind of like a
Oh, well, you tell us.
suspiciously
What do you
nice
think about
gesture
Jamaica?
Because they like the business, but they don't want to be taken over by excessive debt. Also, like mentioned in the Ethiopia episode,
Smart.
Jamaicans love Ethiopia, especially Rastafarians. In terms of their best friends, though, the Jamaicans I've talked to have said most likely their fellow Anglophone nations, the USA, Canada, and the UK. These areas have the largest Jamaican diaspora.
And I think if we even become more specific, maybe the state of Florida would be pretty close, because again, I remember in Miami seeing a lot of people from Jamaica.
Communities, and remittance money makes a huge part of their economy. Visa-free entry is allowed for each nation, and each country places Jamaica high on tourism publicity, which in return gives them huge global popularity. In conclusion, Jamaica is like the little island that could, and music was its fuel. People all around the world now put this tiny landmass in high regard, all because they have that certain Talawa charm, but with a laid-back life that everyone admires. Stay tuned, Japan is coming up
Oh
next.
shit, Japan. Well, would you look at that? That was incredibly fun. Many Jamaicans live in New York City. Again, a lot of people live in New York City, you know? People from all over the world. It's amazing. I never been to New York City, but of course I've heard stories. Gonna head off. Now go to uni tomorrow. Have a good rest of the stream and stay safe, friend. Thank you very much, Thomas. You too. Good luck with uni. Actually, I'm also gonna head off now, since you know I gotta do some things for work and stuff like that. But you guys stay safe. Thank you all. It's been one of the longest streams I've made, over 3 hours of stream. So you guys also stay safe. You know, check my links in the description. You can follow me on Instagram, subscribe to the channel for more content like this. I'm gonna upload some of the videos of the stream, so you can also rewatch them on YouTube if you would like. And thank you very much. Y'all have a good day. And thank you all, my favorite chatters, you know, Gustav, Thomas, Yushley, I'm hopefully not pronouncing that wrong. Get-ass, Philip, Fritos, thank you all. You guys amazing. Get-ass, did I pronounce that correctly? And of course, Jahira Reyes, thank you for being here.